It was a cold November evening in New York City. The streets were filled with the usual hustle and bustle, the sound of honking taxis and the hurried footsteps of people racing home to escape the winter chill. But on a small, forgotten corner near Fifth Avenue, a young girl named Emma sat on the cold pavement. Her clothes were worn and ragged, a stark contrast to the luxury stores just a few blocks away. Her brown eyes looked out with a mixture of hope and defeat, watching as people passed her by without a second glance. She had grown used to this. The streets, the stares, the cold shoulder from the world that seemed to move too fast for anyone like her. She'd been homeless for over a year now. First, it was just a temporary situation, something that would end soon, or so she thought. But now, every day felt like an endless stretch of uncertainty. Emma's mind drifted back to her past, to the foster care system that had failed her and the family that never showed up when she needed them most. She pulled her jacket tighter around herself, trying to find comfort in the numbness of the cold. Maybe tomorrow would be better. Maybe someone would finally notice her. But as night fell, and the glow of the city lights only deepened the shadows around her, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would be just like today. That's when she heard it. A voice, not unfamiliar but certainly unexpected. "Hey, are you all right?" Emma looked up, startled. Standing before her was a tall man in a dark suit. His face was sharp, his expression guarded, but there was a warmth in his eyes that caught her off guard. It took a second for her brain to catch up with the sight before her. The man wasn't just anyone. He was Donald Trump, the former president, the businessman who had made headlines for decades. What was he doing here, in this part of the city, at this hour? Emma blinked, trying to make sense of it. Surely, this wasn't happening. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice a little more defensive than she intended. People had passed by her hundreds of times before, offering nothing but a few glances or a quick shake of their heads. Why would this man stop? Trump looked at her for a moment, as if weighing his next words carefully. "You don't look fine. What's your name?" "Emma," she answered, unsure why she even bothered telling him. "Well, Emma," Trump said, his tone surprisingly gentle for someone known for his bravado, "I think you deserve better than this. Do you need help?" Her heart skipped a beat. Could he be serious? Was this just another publicity stunt? She'd seen enough rich people act like they cared when cameras were around. But this felt different. She could feel the sincerity in his voice, though she still wasn't sure whether to trust it. Trump knelt down, so he was at eye level with her, and for the first time in a long while, Emma didn't feel invisible. "I don't know about everyone," he said. Emma hesitated, staring at the ground. "I don't know if anyone can help me." His voice steady, "But I can. I'll make sure you don't spend another night out here in the cold. How about you come with me? We'll figure this out." Emma's mind raced. What did this man want from her? Why would he care about someone like her? But there was something in his eyes, something that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, this was the break she needed. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Trump straightened up and looked around for a moment before answering. "Because I believe in second chances. And because sometimes it takes a little help from someone else to make a change." For a moment, everything stood still. Emma was caught between skepticism and a glimmer of hope, the kind she hadn't allowed herself to feel in so long. "Okay," she said, the word coming out shakily. "I'll go with you." And with that, the story of Emma and Donald Trump took a turn neither of them had expected. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? This first chapter introduces an unexpected and intriguing twist, drawing the reader in by presenting an unlikely encounter between a homeless girl and a public figure. The contrast between Emma's life on the streets and Trump's status sets the stage for a dramatic exploration of hope, redemption, and transformation. Emma sat silently in the back seat of Trump's black SUV, her body tense, her mind still racing from the encounter just moments ago. She couldn't believe she had agreed to get in the car. She wasn't sure whether it was the kindness in his voice or the desperate hope inside her that pushed her to trust him. But now she was here, heading into the unknown. She looked out the window, watching the bright lights of the city blur as they drove further into Manhattan. The The glow of the streets made her feel even smaller, more invisible than she already was. She'd been in New York long enough to understand the way people moved, the way they glanced at the homeless, the way they pretended not to see the struggle that lived on every street corner. But this was different. Tonight, she wasn't just another face in the crowd. She was a person, and maybe, just maybe, she could start over. But before she could allow herself to feel anything close to gratitude, memories from her past came rushing back like an uncontrollable flood. Her mind wandered to her childhood. She had been just a little girl when she first entered foster care, her parents unable to provide for her in any meaningful way. Her mother, a substance abuser, was unable to care for her, and her father, well, he was never around. Emma remembered the sting of abandonment, that feeling of being tossed aside like a forgotten toy. The system had promised to take care of her, but it had failed her in every way. She remembered the faces of the different foster parents, each of them pretending to care. The ones who sent her away because she was too much to handle or too difficult. The one who would whisper cruel things in her ear when she wasn't performing well in school. And then there were the ones who tried, but even their good intentions couldn't protect her from the deep loneliness that seemed to follow her everywhere. By the time Emma turned 18, she had no real family left. She had been pushed out of the system, given a check for a small amount of money, and sent out into the world with no safety net, no real plan. She had tried to make it on her own, scraping together enough for food, sometimes finding a place to sleep at night. But the world wasn't kind to a young woman with no resources, and soon she found herself on the streets. She remembered how, at first, the hardest part wasn't the cold nights or the hunger. It was the feeling of being invisible. No one cared enough to ask her story. No one cared enough to stop. People just walked by, lost in their own worlds, never acknowledging her existence. She had learned to become invisible, to avoid looking anyone in the eye because the pity was more unbearable than the hunger. But then, there were moments when things could have been different. There were times when she saw a chance for change, when a kind soul might have taken a moment to help her, to say something, anything that showed they saw her. But it never came. Until now. Emma glanced over at Trump, who was seated across from her in the car. He was quiet, his face set in an expression of deep thought, but there was something about him that didn't seem entirely cold. He wasn't the figure she had seen on television, the controversial businessman or the former president. He was just a man, offering her something. An opportunity, maybe, but more than anything, a chance. She broke the silence first, unsure of what to say. I don't know why you're doing this. You don't even know me. Trump looked at her, his gaze softening. I don't need to know you, Emma. You're a person, and I can see you're trying. That's enough for me. Her chest tightened. It had been so long since anyone had said something like that to her. She wasn't used to being seen, not like this. Why did you come here, to New York? Trump asked, his voice gentle but curious. What brought you here? Emma swallowed, trying to steady her breathing. She wasn't sure why she was telling him this, why she felt compelled to share her story, but the words came out anyway. I wanted a chance, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I came to the city, I could make something of myself. But, she trailed off, shaking her head, it didn't work out. I just keep getting pushed further down. Trump nodded, as if he understood. He didn't interrupt her, didn't rush her to finish. There was something in his manner that made her feel as though she could say anything, that he wouldn't judge her. Everyone gets pushed down sometimes, he said quietly, but it's what you do after that matters. You've got to keep getting back up. Emma's eyes flickered to him, not sure if she was hearing him correctly. How do you know that? Trump leaned back in his seat, his fingers tapping on the armrest, deep in thought. Because I've been there. Not in the exact way you have, but I've had my share of failures. I've had my own struggles, even if they're different from yours. The key is not to let those things define you. Emma took a deep breath, absorbing his words. Was this really happening? Could this be the beginning of something better? She wasn't sure yet, but she allowed herself a small sliver of hope, something she hadn't allowed herself in a long time. As the car turned onto a quiet street, Trump spoke again. You're going to stay with me for a while, Emma. I'm going to help you get on your feet. No gimmicks, no cameras. Just a chance for you to rebuild your life. Emma looked out the window, the weight of his words settling over her like a heavy blanket. Could she really trust this man? Could she trust anyone anymore? But as the car pulled up to a large, imposing building that could only be Trump Tower, a part of her knew that this could be the beginning of something more. Maybe, just maybe, she had finally found a way out of the darkness. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't invisible anymore. In this chapter, we delve deeper into Emma's backstory, allowing the audience to connect with her emotional journey. Her struggles with abandonment, the foster care system, and homelessness paint a picture of her resilience and vulnerability. Trump's offering of help is no longer just an isolated moment. It's an invitation to a new path that both challenges and empowers Emma to open up and trust again. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Emma stepped out into the pristine marble lobby of Trump Tower. The sleek, polished floors reflected the soft light from the towering glass windows, casting a bright glow on everything in sight. It was the first time in over a year that Emma found herself in a place that didn't feel cold, dark, or dangerous. The walls were lined with golden accents, and the air smelled of luxury, of wealth and success. It was overwhelming, almost suffocating, and for a moment, Emma felt out of place. Trump, walking confidently ahead of her, gestured for her to follow him. His presence seemed to fill the room in a way that made Emma feel even smaller, like she had wandered into a world she wasn't meant to see. The contrast between her worn clothes and the polished, opulent surroundings only made her feel more self-conscious. "You're going to stay in one of the guest suites?" Trump said, leading her through the lobby, his voice steady, but there was a slight kindness in it that Emma hadn't expected. "I'll have my team arrange everything for you. Food, clothes, everything you need to get started." She nodded, still unable to fully process what was happening. This was surreal. Just hours ago, she had been sitting on the streets, invisible to the world, and now she was here, inside one of the most famous buildings in the world, being treated like someone important. They reached a private elevator, and Trump pressed the button for the top floor. As the doors closed, Emma glanced over at him. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again, her voice laced with disbelief. "You don't owe me anything. I don't even know you." Trump looked at her, his face hardening for a moment, before softening again. "I don't owe you anything, no. But I believe everyone deserves a second chance. I've had my share of ups and downs, Emma, and if I can give someone like you the opportunity to start over, to turn things around, then I'm going to do it." The elevator pinged as it reached the top floor, and the doors slid open to reveal a spacious penthouse suite. Emma stepped out, wide-eyed, as she took in the luxurious surroundings. A sprawling living room with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city below. Everything was immaculate, from the plush furniture to the art adorning the walls. It was a world far removed from the streets she had known, a world that seemed impossibly distant. "You're going to be fine here, Emma," Trump said, his voice more serious now. "You'll have the time and space to figure things out, but I need you to be honest with me. You're not going to waste this opportunity, are you?" Emma hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. The weight of his words hit her harder than she expected. The last year of her life had been a constant struggle to survive, to find a way out of her situation. She wasn't used to being handed opportunities. She had always had to fight for everything. And now, she was being given a chance. But it was more than just a chance for survival. It was a chance to change her life. "I won't waste it," she said, her voice steady, though she could feel the tension building inside her. She didn't know what that meant yet, or how she was going to make it happen, but she knew one thing. This was the only shot she had. "I'll try my best." Trump nodded approvingly. "Good. Because you don't get second chances every day." He motioned toward the couch and the large flat-screen TV on the wall. "Make yourself comfortable. I'll have someone bring up some food in a bit. Take a shower, change into something fresh. You've earned it." Emma nodded, still unsure of how to react to the sudden shift in her life. She had spent so much time just trying to survive, focusing on the immediate need for food, shelter, and safety. But now, there were choices. There was time. And there was this strange pressure building in her chest, the weight of an unknown future. "I'll leave you to it," Trump said, giving her a final nod before walking toward the door. "Don't waste this, Emma. You've got a chance now. Don't blow it." The door closed behind him, and Emma was left standing in the middle of the suite, alone. She walked slowly to the window, gazing out over the city. The view was incredible. The lights of Manhattan stretched out before her like a sea of stars. It was beautiful, but it also felt so far away, so out of reach. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt a sense of possibility. She could breathe again. But with that sense of freedom came the overwhelming weight of responsibility. She had no idea what to do next. What did a second chance look like? How could she, someone who had spent so much time in survival mode, figure out how to thrive in a world that had always seemed so foreign to her? Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a text message from Trump's assistant, confirming the details of her stay and asking what she needed. She stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, "I need to think." Emma sat back on the couch, her mind spinning with questions and doubts. She had no idea where to start, how to move forward. For so long, she had lived day to day, clinging to the barest scraps of hope. But now, the world was offering her something more, something real. The question was, could she handle it? And in the back of her mind, another thought lingered, one she hadn't dared to voice out loud. What if she failed? In this chapter, the rising conflict begins to build as Emma faces the tension between the opportunity Trump has given her and her own fears and insecurities. The pressure to succeed becomes a major internal struggle for Emma, adding complexity to her character. The contrast between her past life and her current situation is highlighted, setting the stage for the challenges and emotional growth she will face in the chapters ahead. Emma's journey from survival to potential success is only just beginning, but the road ahead is filled with obstacles and doubts that will test her resolve. The days that followed Emma's arrival at Trump Tower felt like a blur. At first, she allowed herself to indulge in the comfort that came with having a roof over her head, hot water, and fresh clothes. It had been so long since she'd experienced anything close to normalcy that it took everything in her to just sit still and savor the moment. But as the days turned into weeks, the relief started to wear thin. She couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't belong here. She spent most of her time in the penthouse, trying to make sense of the life she now had before her, but the weight of her past, the memories of the streets, and the people she had left behind, kept creeping back in. One evening, after a quiet dinner alone, Emma stood by the window, gazing out over the sprawling city. The lights were mesmerizing, twinkling like diamonds in the night sky, but the view that once seemed like a dream now felt like a prison. No matter how comfortable the suite was, no matter how much Trump's team had done for her, Emma felt an overwhelming sense of isolation. She was alone in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. Her phone buzzed in her hand, snapping her from her thoughts. It was a message from a number she didn't recognize. She hesitated for a moment before opening it. "Hey, Emma, it's Jason. How's it going?" Jason, her old friend from the streets. The one person she had shared a bond with before everything changed. She had been avoiding him for days, unsure of how to explain her sudden shift in life. She had tried to cut ties with her past, but it wasn't so simple. Jason was a reminder of everything she had left behind. The rough streets, the nights spent in abandoned buildings, the fights over scraps of food. Her life had been a constant hustle, and Jason had been right there with her, until she left. Emma stared at the message for a long time, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She had to reply, didn't she? But what could she say? She couldn't pretend everything was okay. She couldn't pretend she hadn't taken a leap into a new world, one that didn't have any place for someone like Jason. "I'm doing well," she typed finally, her fingers trembling. "Things have changed. I'm living in a place now, with Trump." The message seemed to hang in the air as she hit send. The weight of what she had written felt heavier than anything she had ever typed before. She had no idea how Jason would react. Within seconds, her phone buzzed again. "Trump?" Jason replied. "What the hell, Emma? Are you serious?" Emma sat down on the couch, staring at the screen. Jason's words were sharp, and they cut deeper than she'd anticipated. She hadn't expected him to understand, but the harshness of his response stung all the same. She sighed, feeling a familiar sense of guilt creep in. She had been the one to walk away from the only life she knew, and now, Jason's bitterness only reminded her of the consequences of that choice. The phone buzzed again. You think this is the life you want? You think Trump's gonna save you? Don't you remember what it's like out here? What you left behind? Emma closed her eyes, trying to push back the wave of emotions that had risen in her chest. She felt conflicted. On the one hand, she had chosen to escape her past. On the other, she had lost the only connection she had to her old life. Was she really ready to let go of everything? She stared at the messages, unable to respond right away. The pain of her past wasn't so easily dismissed. The struggle, the sacrifices, and the choices she had made. It all felt real again. She was beginning to realize that no matter how much her circumstances had changed, the emotional scars were still there, lingering beneath the surface. The next day, Trump invited her to join him for lunch at one of his private clubs in Manhattan. She had been avoiding him for the last few days, feeling a mounting pressure to live up to the promise she had made to herself and to him. She had to prove that she wasn't just some lost cause. She had to make this work, even though the weight of her past seemed like an anchor pulling her down. As she walked into the lavish dining room, Trump stood at the front, his towering figure casting a long shadow. The room was buzzing with conversation, but it quieted when he saw her. He smiled, gesturing for her to take a seat across from him. "Glad you could make it," he said, his voice warm but with a hint of authority that always seemed to be there. "How are you feeling today?" Emma sat down slowly, her mind still swirling with doubt and the remnants of Jason's harsh words. She wasn't sure if she was ready to face Trump yet, not when she still hadn't figured out what her next move would be. "I'm all right," she said, forcing a smile. "Just trying to figure everything out." Trump studied her for a moment before speaking again. "I know this is a big change, but you have to remember, what's in the past doesn't control your future. You get to decide that." Emma nodded, though a part of her wasn't so sure. The weight of her choices, the people she had left behind, the life she had walked away from, felt like a heavy burden on her shoulders. She couldn't just erase everything and pretend it didn't matter. "I know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's just hard. I don't know how to let go of everything." Trump leaned forward, his tone softening. "You don't have to let go of everything all at once, but you have to start somewhere. And if you want to move forward, you have to stop looking back." Emma looked at him, unsure of how to respond. She wanted to believe him, to trust that everything would work out if she just took the next step. But every time she closed her eyes, she could still see the street corners, the alleyways, and Jason's face. "You've got a chance now, Emma," Trump continued. "This isn't just about survival. It's about building a future, and I'll help you every step of the way. But you've got to trust the process." For a moment, Emma felt a flicker of hope, the smallest glimmer that maybe, just maybe, she could move forward. But the doubts lingered, the struggles she had left behind still pulling at her heart. In this chapter, Emma begins to confront the emotional complexities of her new life. Her relationship with her past, particularly her connection to Jason and the life she once knew, becomes a source of inner conflict. The contrast between her old life and her current one is felt more deeply, and the pressure to move forward while grappling with past attachments heightens the stakes. Trump's guidance offers a path forward, but Emma must learn to trust herself and embrace the new opportunities in front of her. The chapter marks the beginning of her internal journey, a journey towards self-acceptance and letting go of the past in order to embrace the future. The weeks seemed to blur together as Emma continued to settle into her new life at Trump Tower. She had a private suite, access to luxury amenities, and a chance to start fresh. But despite the opulence surrounding her, the emptiness inside her only deepened. The nagging doubts, the haunting memories of the streets, and the text messages from Jason continued to plague her thoughts. She tried to ignore it. She tried to embrace her new reality. But no matter how many times she reminded herself that she was given a rare opportunity, it never felt enough to silence the voice inside her telling her she didn't belong here. One evening, as she sat by the large window overlooking the glittering city lights, her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Jason. It was a message from Trump's assistant, letting her know that Trump wanted to meet with her the next day for an important discussion. Emma stared at the text, her stomach twisting. She had been avoiding Trump in the past few days, not wanting to confront the growing sense of guilt that weighed heavily on her. She hadn't made any progress, hadn't taken the steps he had hoped for. She wasn't sure if she was ready to face him, or ready to admit that she might not be able to live up to the expectations that came with this new life. But the meeting was inevitable. Trump had been kind to her, given her a chance when no one else had. She couldn't just disappear, not without understanding what this was all really about. So, with a deep breath, she pulled herself together and prepared for what was to come. The next morning, Emma made her way to the dining room. Trump was already there, standing near the large windows, looking out at the city below. His presence was commanding, as always, but there was something different about the way he carried himself that day. He seemed more serious. "Good morning, Emma," Trump said, his voice lower than usual. "I wanted to talk to you about your future, about what comes next." Emma sat down across from him, her palms sweaty. "I've been trying, Mr. Trump. I really have. But it's been harder than I thought. I don't know how to let go of the past." Trump studied her carefully, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I know, but you're not the same person you were. You have to trust that." She shook her head, unable to hold back the tears that had been threatening to surface for days. "I don't feel different. I don't feel like I belong here. I feel like I'm just pretending to be someone I'm not. I don't know if I can keep doing this. It's too much." The words tumbled out in a rush, and Emma felt her chest tighten with emotion. She had tried to hold everything inside, tried to keep up the facade of strength, but it was all unraveling now. The truth was that she didn't know how to live in this new world, didn't know how to face the people who had given her a chance. She had been pretending, to everyone, even to herself. Trump didn't say anything for a moment. He simply watched her, as if he were trying to understand the storm inside her. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Emma, listen to me," he said. "You've come a long way, but I don't want you to think this is about being perfect. It's about progress, about taking that next step, no matter how hard it is. And I know it's hard, but you have to believe in yourself. I believe in you." Emma looked up at him, her heart racing. "But I'm not perfect. I don't have all the answers. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do here." "You don't need to have all the answers," Trump replied, leaning forward. "You just need to keep moving forward. You don't need to pretend to be something you're not. You just need to be you, the person who survived, the person who made it here. And that's enough." Emma felt the weight of his words sink in. She had been so focused on what she didn't have, on what she had left behind, that she hadn't stopped to think about what she had gained. She had survived. She had made it out of a life of uncertainty and despair, and now she had a chance to build something new. But the fear was still there. The fear that she would fail, that she would disappoint the people who had believed in her, that she would never be able to truly let go of her past. "Mr. Trump," she said quietly, "I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm strong enough." Trump's gaze softened. "You're stronger than you think, and you don't have to do this alone. You have people here who care about you, who want to see you succeed. But you have to trust the process. Trust yourself." Emma took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she wiped away the tears that had started to fall. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel vulnerable, to feel human. She didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to have it all figured out. The road ahead would be difficult. It would be filled with uncertainty, with moments of doubt, and with the echoes of a past that would never fully disappear. But maybe that was okay. Maybe the journey wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about learning to live with it, to use it as the fuel to propel herself forward. "I'll try," Emma whispered. "I'll try." Trump smiled, a look of approval in his eyes. "That's all I ask." As the weight of the conversation began to lift, Emma felt something shift inside her. She wasn't alone in this anymore. She had people who cared, people who wanted to help her succeed. And for the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope. In this chapter, Emma reaches a critical emotional turning point. The weight of her fears, doubts, and guilt overwhelms her, but Trump's words provide a sense of clarity and encouragement. The emotional climax of the story comes when Emma allows herself to break down, to admit her fears, and to accept that she doesn't need to be perfect to move forward. The resolution is not one of instant success, but one of emotional growth, a pivotal moment where Emma begins to believe in her own strength and takes the first steps toward embracing the future, despite the obstacles. This chapter solidifies her growth, as she starts to realize that her past doesn't define her future. The days following Emma's emotional breakthrough felt different. It was as though a weight had been lifted off her shoulders, even though she knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. She had finally stopped pretending to be someone she wasn't. For the first time since stepping into Trump Tower, she was starting to accept that the past, with all its hardships, wasn't something to hide from. It was a part of her story, and it could shape her future if she let it. After her conversation with Trump, she spent the next few days reflecting on what he had said. His words echoed in her mind. You just need to keep moving forward. She had been so focused on what she had lost, on what she hadn't achieved, that she had forgotten to see how far she had come. She had survived the harshest of circumstances. She had made it through the hardest battles, and now, in this unexpected chapter of her life, she had the chance to build something new. The next morning, Emma stood by the same window where she had stared out at the city weeks before. The view was still breathtaking, the lights still twinkling below like a sea of stars, but something about it felt different now. Instead of feeling isolated, she felt connected to the city. She wasn't just a lost girl from the streets anymore. She was part of something bigger, something that could make a real difference in her life. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Jason. Emma hesitated for a moment before opening it. I get it now. You're not running away. You're trying to build something new. I'm proud of you, Emma. Don't let anyone tell you different. The road ahead would be difficult. It would be filled with uncertainty, with moments of doubt, and with the echoes of a past that would never fully disappear. But maybe that was okay. Maybe the journey wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about learning to live with it, to use it as the fuel to propel herself forward. I'll try, Emma whispered. I'll try. Trump smiled, a look of approval in his eyes. That's all I ask. As the weight of the conversation began to lift, Emma felt something shift inside her. She wasn't alone in this anymore. She had people who cared, people who wanted to help her succeed. And for the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope. In this chapter, Emma reaches a critical emotional turning point. The weight of her fears, doubts, and guilt overwhelms her, but Trump's words provide a sense of clarity and encouragement. The emotional climax of the story comes when Emma allows herself to break down, to admit her fears, and to accept that she doesn't need to be perfect to move forward. The resolution is not one of instant success, but one of emotional growth, a pivotal moment where Emma begins to believe in her own strength and takes the first steps toward embracing the future, despite the obstacles. This chapter solidifies her growth, as she starts to realize that her past doesn't define her future. The days following Emma's emotional breakthrough felt different. It was as though a weight had been lifted off her shoulders, even though she knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. She had finally stopped pretending to be someone she wasn't. For the first time since stepping into Trump Tower, she was starting to accept that the past, with all its hardships, wasn't something to hide from. It was a part of her story, and it could shape her future if she let it. After her conversation with Trump, she spent the next few days reflecting on what he had said. His words echoed in her mind. You just need to keep moving forward. She had been so focused on what she had lost, on what she hadn't achieved, that she had forgotten to see how far she had come. She had survived the harshest of circumstances. She had made it through the hardest battles, and now, in this unexpected chapter of her life, she had the chance to build something new. The next morning, Emma stood by the same window where she had stared out at the city weeks before. The view was still breathtaking, the lights still twinkling below like a sea of stars, but something about it felt different now. Instead of feeling isolated, she felt connected to the city. She wasn't just a lost girl from the streets anymore. She was part of something bigger, something that could make a real difference in her life. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Jason. Emma hesitated for a moment before opening it. I get it now. You're not running away. You're trying to build something new. I'm proud of you, Emma. Don't let anyone tell you different. Her relationship with Trump deepened as well. He wasn't just the benefactor who had given her a place to stay. He was a mentor, guiding her through the complexities of the business world and showing her the ropes of what it meant to truly succeed. There were moments when Emma felt overwhelmed, unsure if she was truly cut out for this new world. But Trump was always there, encouraging her to keep going, reminding her that setbacks were a part of the process and that growth didn't happen overnight. As she looked back on everything she had been through, the streets, the uncertainty, the fear, it was hard to believe how much her life had changed. She was no longer the girl who had arrived at Trump Tower with nothing but the clothes on her back. She was now someone with a purpose, someone who had found a new path forward. One evening, as she sat in her suite, watching the city lights flicker outside, Emma allowed herself a moment of reflection. She had made it. Against all odds, she had overcome the darkness of her past and stepped into a new life, one full of possibilities. It wasn't a perfect story. It wasn't without its struggles or fears, but it was hers, and that made all the difference. Emma's journey had just begun, and she knew, no matter what came next, she had the strength to face it. In this final chapter, Emma comes full circle in her personal journey. She no longer views herself as a victim of her past, but as someone capable of creating a new future. The support from Trump and the lessons she learned along the way help her transform from a girl who felt lost and alone into a confident, driven individual who is ready to take on the challenges ahead. The resolution of the story is one of hope, self-discovery, and empowerment, reminding readers that no matter where they start, the potential to rise above is always there. As the months passed, Emma settled into her new life. What once seemed like an impossible dream had become her reality. She now had a career, a place to call home, and a sense of purpose. But as much as she had embraced her transformation, Emma knew that the road ahead wasn't going to be free of obstacles. Each day brought new challenges, some small and some monumental. The world she now inhabited was nothing like the streets she had come from. There were expectations, deadlines, and high-pressure situations. There were moments when she felt like an outsider, unsure of her place among people who had lived privileged lives all their own. Yet, despite her doubts, Emma knew that she was no longer the same person who had arrived at Trump Tower months ago, desperate and broken. She had learned to navigate the world of business with confidence, taking on more significant roles in Trump's empire. There were days when she felt like she was drowning in the responsibilities, and nights when she would stay up late, trying to piece together complicated documents and proposals. But each time, she found a way to overcome the challenges, leaning on the lessons she had learned from Trump: persistence, resilience, and never allowing herself to be defined by failure. But despite her growing success, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that there was still a part of her life she hadn't fully confronted: Jason. She hadn't heard from him in weeks. His messages had stopped coming after that final text exchange, and while Emma had convinced herself that it was for the best, there was a part of her that still held onto the hope that he would show up one day, just as he always had when things seemed too difficult. One evening, as she was finishing up a meeting at Trump Tower, her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. Curious, Emma answered. "Hello?" "Emma," a voice said. It was Jason. "It's me. I know it's been a while, but I've been thinking about you. I just wanted to check in." Emma's heart skipped a beat. There was a rush of emotion, relief, confusion, and a hint of caution. She hadn't expected this. She had almost convinced herself that Jason had moved on, that their paths had diverged for good. Yet here he was, reaching out once again. "Jason," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's been a long time. How have you been?" "I've been good, really. It's been tough, but I'm managing. I've been following what you've been doing, and I'm proud of you. You've really turned things around." His words filled Emma with a mixture of gratitude and guilt. She had made it. She had found success, something that had once seemed impossible. But at the same time, a part of her felt like she was betraying her old self, the girl who had once relied so heavily on Jason to survive. "I don't know what to say, Jason," she admitted. "Things have changed. A lot has happened." "I can imagine," Jason replied. "I know I wasn't there for you like I should have been. I'm sorry for that. But I just want you to know that I've always cared about you. I still do." Emma felt a lump form in her throat. She had wanted to hear these words for so long, but now that they were out in the open, she wasn't sure how to respond. She had come so far, and part of her feared that reconnecting with Jason might pull her back into the uncertainty she had worked so hard to escape. "I don't know where we stand anymore, Jason," Emma said, her voice soft. "I've changed, and I'm not sure if we can just go back to the way things were." Jason's voice grew quieter. "I understand. I know you've moved on, and maybe I haven't. But I want you to know that I'll always be here for you, no matter what." Emma sat silently for a moment, her thoughts racing. She had come to realize that her past wasn't something to run from. It was a part of who she was. But at the same time, she couldn't let her past define her future. She had worked too hard to build this new life, and while she still cared for Jason, she knew that her journey had to continue without looking back. "I appreciate that, Jason," she said finally, "but I think we need to move on. I have to keep going forward. And so do you." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, Jason spoke, his voice tinged with sadness but also understanding. "I get it. I always knew you'd do great things, Emma, and I'm glad you've found your path." "Take care of yourself, Jason," Emma said, her voice firm but gentle. As she ended the call, Emma sat back in her chair, allowing herself a moment of quiet reflection. Saying goodbye to Jason wasn't easy. It wasn't a clear-cut decision, but it was the right one. She had learned that sometimes letting go was the only way to move forward. The next morning, as Emma walked through the halls of Trump Tower, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her life wasn't perfect, and there would still be days of doubt and uncertainty, but she was no longer defined by her past. She was moving forward, step by step, into a future that was hers to create. She had made it this far, and she knew that, with every challenge she faced, she was more than capable of handling whatever came next. In this chapter, Emma confronts the emotional tug of her past relationship with Jason. Despite her success and personal growth, the connection she shared with Jason continues to linger, making it difficult for her to fully embrace her new life. Through a heartfelt conversation, Emma realizes that while she still cares for him, she must let go of the past to continue her journey forward. This chapter highlights the emotional complexity of moving on from past relationships, while also reinforcing the importance of self-growth and embracing new opportunities. As Emma's life continued to settle into a rhythm of newfound success, a challenge emerged that tested her like nothing else before. She had grown comfortable in her new role, managing responsibilities, working alongside Trump's team, and taking charge of projects. But just when she thought she was beginning to understand her place in this world, a sudden situation arose that threatened to shatter everything she had worked for. It started with a phone call, one that she couldn't have predicted. "Emma, we need to talk. It's urgent." Trump's voice was unusually stern when she answered his call that afternoon. "Meet me in my office in an hour." Her heart skipped a beat. It was rare for Trump to request a meeting so urgently, and the tone of his voice sent a chill down her spine. What could this be about? Was there a problem with her work? Was she about to be let go? She shook off the nerves and rushed to his office, her mind racing. She had come so far. She couldn't afford to fall apart now. When she arrived, Trump was already sitting behind his desk, his face as serious as ever. There were no pleasantries, no small talk. His gaze was steady, calculating. Emma sat across from him, trying her best to remain composed. "There's a situation we need to address," Trump began, his voice firm. "One of our high-profile deals is in jeopardy. There's been a leak of sensitive information from within the company, and it could cost us millions. We need to find out who's behind it and fix this fast." Emma's stomach tightened. She had always known the stakes were high working for Trump, but this was something else entirely. A leak like this could have disastrous consequences, not just for the company, but for her too. If she was involved in any way, if even a hint of suspicion fell on her, everything she had worked for could disappear. "This is serious, Emma," Trump continued. "I need you to help with the investigation. I trust you, and I believe you're the best person to uncover who's behind this. We don't have much time." Her mind raced as Trump's words sank in. She had been part of many business meetings and strategy sessions, but this was different. This wasn't about making deals or improving the company's bottom line. This was about uncovering a betrayal from within, and the weight of it felt like 1,000 pounds on her shoulders. "I understand," Emma said, her voice steady despite the storm of anxiety inside her. I won't let you down. Trump nodded. I'm counting on you. We need to act quickly, and we need to be thorough. Start by reviewing all the files related to the deal and see if anything seems off. We can't afford to overlook anything. As she left his office, Emma felt a strange mix of dread and determination. She had no choice but to dive into the investigation headfirst. She couldn't afford to let her fear take control. This was her chance to prove that she had truly earned her place here. Over the next few days, Emma worked tirelessly. She combed through every document, every email, every phone record related to the deal. She spent hours analyzing data, cross-referencing information, and digging through past communications. It was grueling work, and the pressure was mounting with every passing hour. She could feel the weight of the responsibility bearing down on her, but she pushed through it, determined to uncover the truth. Her colleagues noticed the shift in her demeanor. She wasn't the same bright, confident woman they had come to know. She was laser-focused, driven by something deeper than just the desire to succeed. She was driven by the fear of failure, the fear that everything she had built could come crashing down in an instant. One afternoon, after days of relentless work, Emma found something that made her blood run cold. In one of the files she had been reviewing, there was an email thread that didn't seem to fit. It was buried within the hundreds of messages she had gone through, but something about it felt off. As she dug deeper into the thread, the pieces began to fall into place. The leak hadn't come from an outside source, as everyone had assumed. It had come from someone inside the company, someone close to the deal. Emma's heart raced as she stared at the name at the end of the email chain. It was someone she had worked with closely, someone she trusted. Her mind reeled. She couldn't believe it. It couldn't be true. This person had been a part of the team, had contributed to the project she had worked on. The realization was staggering, but there was no time for doubt. She had to act fast. Emma immediately called Trump and arranged a meeting. When she arrived, she knew she had to be careful with her next steps. This wasn't just a business issue. It was personal. The betrayal was a gut punch, and the person responsible was someone she had considered an ally. Trump, I found something, Emma said, her voice calm but tinged with urgency. She handed him the file, and he read through it carefully. This is it, Trump said after a long pause. You've done well, Emma, but this is just the beginning. We need to make sure this doesn't escalate further. The betrayal hit Emma hard, but she couldn't afford to let it affect her. This was about more than just one person's actions. It was about protecting everything she had worked for and ensuring the integrity of the company. She had come so far, and now she had to prove that she could handle this storm. I'll take care of it, Emma replied, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside her. We'll get this sorted out. In that moment, Emma knew that this challenge would define her in ways she couldn't yet understand. She had been tested before, but this was different. The stakes were higher, and the risk was greater. But she was ready. This was her chance to show that she was more than just a survivor of her past. She was a force to be reckoned with. As she left Trump's office, Emma felt a renewed sense of determination. The road ahead was uncertain, but she was no longer afraid. She had faced the darkness before, and she would face it again. This time with the strength of someone who knew exactly what was at stake. In this chapter, Emma faces an unexpected and high-stakes challenge, a company-wide leak that threatens everything she has worked for. This situation forces her to confront her own vulnerabilities and test her resolve in ways she never anticipated. The discovery of betrayal within her team hits her hard, but it also becomes a turning point in her growth. Emma's response to the crisis demonstrates her transformation from a vulnerable young woman to a confident and capable leader. The stakes are higher than ever, and the next chapter will determine if she can truly rise above this test. The discovery of the leak had shaken Emma to her core. Betrayal, especially from someone she considered a colleague and confidant, left a bitter taste in her mouth. The walls of her world, which had seemed so solid and secure just days ago, felt as though they were closing in around her. But Emma wasn't one to back down from a fight, not anymore. The first thing she had to do was confirm that the evidence she had found was indisputable. She spent countless hours going over every detail, cross-referencing names, dates, and emails. Her stomach churned as she pieced it together. The culprit wasn't just any junior team member. It was Mark, a senior executive who had been part of the project from the very beginning. He was someone Emma had worked closely with, someone who had even mentored her in the early days of her new role at Trump Tower. How could he betray the very company that had given him everything? The question haunted her, but she couldn't afford to dwell on it. The stakes were too high. Emma had to act swiftly. She had to confront Mark before the situation escalated further. But she knew she couldn't do this alone. This was no longer just about a corporate breach. It was about protecting the integrity of everything she had worked for. She had to go to Trump. He was the only one who could help her navigate this delicate situation. She called him the moment she had everything laid out. He answered quickly. "Trump, it's urgent. We need to meet now," Emma said, trying to mask the gravity in her voice. "I'm free in 10 minutes. I'll see you in my office." When Emma arrived, Trump's expression was unreadable. He was calm, but she knew from his body language that he understood the weight of the situation. She handed him the file she had prepared, detailing Mark's betrayal. Trump skimmed through it, his eyes narrowing with each page. "So it's Mark," Trump said, his voice cold. "I had my suspicions, but now we have proof." Emma nodded, her throat dry. "I don't understand why he would do this. He had everything, power, privilege. He had a future with this company. Why risk it all?" Trump leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. People do strange things when they're desperate. Maybe he thought he could get away with it. Or maybe he was promised something bigger from the outside. Either way, it doesn't matter now. We have to move quickly. Emma felt the weight of the responsibility press down on her. What should we do? Trump didn't hesitate. We confront him, expose him, but we need to do it carefully. We can't let him know we have all the evidence. If we give him the opportunity to destroy any more files or connections, it'll be even harder to recover. We'll confront him with just enough to make him panic, then force him to confess. The faster we move, the better. Emma's heart was pounding in her chest. This wasn't just a business decision. This was personal. Mark had been a part of her life in ways she hadn't expected, and the thought of confronting him in such a way made her stomach twist. But she reminded herself that this wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting the company and her place in it. "Understood," Emma said, her voice steady. "I'll set up the meeting." As she left Trump's office, Emma could feel the weight of the upcoming confrontation settling in. She knew it wasn't going to be easy. Mark had always been charming, well-liked by the rest of the team. If she went in guns blazing, she risked alienating everyone, including Trump. She had to remain calm, strategic, and professional. She arranged the meeting with Mark for the following day. As the hour approached, Emma found herself pacing the room, running through the conversation in her head. She wasn't sure what to expect, whether Mark would try to deny it, act innocent, or turn the tables and accuse her of something. But whatever happened, she had to stay in control. The moment she stepped into the conference room, Mark was already seated at the table, a confident smile on his face. He rose when she entered, offering a handshake that Emma couldn't bring herself to return. She took a seat, the silence between them thick and uncomfortable. "Emma, how's everything going?" Mark asked, his voice smooth. He had no idea what was coming. "I'm doing well, Mark. Thanks for asking," Emma replied, her voice calm but with an edge of professionalism. "Actually, I called this meeting because there's something important we need to discuss." Mark raised an eyebrow, sensing that something was off. "What's going on?" Emma took a deep breath. She had to approach this carefully. "I've been reviewing some of the files related to the recent project, and I came across something that didn't sit right. It seems that some of the information has been leaked from inside the company, specifically from someone who's been directly involved in the deal." Mark's face remained unreadable, but his eyes flickered for just a second. Barely noticeable, but Emma caught it. She pressed on. "We have evidence linking you to the leak, Mark," she said, her voice unwavering. For a moment, there was a heavy silence in the room. Then, Mark's smile faltered. His mask cracked, and Emma could see the panic in his eyes. He tried to recover, but the facade was gone. "What are you talking about?" Mark said, his voice rising slightly. "You can't seriously believe I'd do something like that. I've been with this company for years." Emma didn't waver. "The evidence is clear, Mark. We know it was you." and we're prepared to take this to the authorities if necessary." Mark's face drained of color as the truth hit him. Emma could see the shift in his demeanor, the desperate scramble for an escape, the guilt written all over his face. He leaned forward, his voice lowering. "You don't understand, Emma," he said, his tone now pleading. "It wasn't supposed to go this far. I was promised a position with another company. They offered me everything, money, power. But I needed to make sure the deal went through. I didn't think it would get exposed like this." Emma's stomach churned. She had always believed in people's potential, their ability to rise above the temptation of easy money. But Mark's confession made it clear that some people would stop at nothing to protect their own ambitions, even if it meant destroying the company that had given them everything. "I'm sorry, Mark," Emma said quietly, the words feeling heavier than they should. "But you've left us no choice. You've put the entire company at risk, and there's no way we can overlook that." The confrontation ended with Mark being escorted out of the building, his future within the company shattered. Emma stood in the conference room, the weight of the moment sinking in. She had done what needed to be done, but the personal toll of this betrayal lingered. As she left the room, she couldn't shake the feeling that this would be a turning point in her journey, a test of her ability to handle the pressures of her new life and to stay true to her values, no matter the cost. In this chapter, Emma confronts Mark, the senior executive who has betrayed the company. The emotional toll of the betrayal is significant, but Emma handles the confrontation with professionalism and poise, reflecting her growth and ability to navigate difficult situations. The chapter also underscores Emma's development from a vulnerable young woman to a capable, strong leader who can protect everything she has worked for. The story of Mark's fall from grace serves as a reminder of the personal sacrifices and challenges Emma faces in her journey. The fallout from Mark's betrayal was swift and devastating. Within days, the company's top brass had been informed, and Trump's legal team was already in motion, handling the legal implications of the leak. Emma, though relieved to have confronted Mark and exposed the truth, couldn't shake the weight of the situation. She had always been a person who believed in second chances and redemption, but this betrayal, this breach of trust, had cut deeper than she ever imagined. For the first time since she had stepped into this new life, Emma questioned the decisions she had made. Had she been too trusting? Had she missed the warning signs? Mark had been someone she worked alongside every day, someone she respected. It stung more than she cared to admit, but she couldn't afford to let it distract her. The company's future was at risk, and there was no time for regrets. Trump was clearly affected by the situation, though he kept a stoic front. Emma had become accustomed to his sharp business acumen and no-nonsense attitude, but even he seemed rattled by the implications of the betrayal. Yet, in the midst of all the chaos, he turned to Emma, as he had done before, for guidance. "I know you're taking this hard, Emma," Trump said one morning in his office, "but you did the right thing. You're not just a part of this team anymore. You're a leader now. This is your company, too. You have to think about the long term. What's done is done. We move forward." Emma nodded, though she couldn't help but feel the heavy weight of his words. She had been thrust into this world with so many expectations, and with each challenge, the stakes seemed to rise higher. But Trump's confidence in her was unwavering, and she couldn't afford to let him down. "I'll do what needs to be done," Emma replied, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "But this isn't just about business anymore, is it? It's personal." Trump looked at her, his gaze softening for the first time since the crisis began. "It always is, Emma. But don't let the personal side of things cloud your judgment. You've got the mind for this. You've earned your place. You just need to trust yourself." Emma took a deep breath, feeling the weight of those words settle in her chest. She had been running on autopilot, focusing on tasks and deadlines, but now, more than ever, she had to trust herself, not just in business, but in the life she had built. The aftermath of the leak wasn't just about Mark's fall from grace. It was about rebuilding. Trust had been shattered within the company, and Emma knew that her role would be key in restoring it. She began meeting with key players, working to reassure them that the company would move forward stronger than ever. In the days that followed, Emma found herself managing crisis after crisis. The media had caught wind of the scandal, and stories began circulating about the internal corruption at Trump Tower. The pressure was mounting. She knew she couldn't do this alone. She called in the team for a meeting, gathering the key figures to discuss how they would repair the damage. Each person had their own perspective, but Emma was quick to take charge, her voice firm and clear. "We're going to be transparent with our employees and the public," Emma began. "This isn't just a business issue. It's a matter of trust. We'll apologize for the breach, take responsibility, and show everyone that we're doing everything we can to prevent this from happening again. We'll start by conducting an internal audit, ensuring that every part of the company is secure." The room fell silent as her words hung in the air. It was a bold move, but Emma knew it was the only way to move forward. She had to rebuild the trust that had been broken, and the only way to do that was to be open and honest, no matter how painful it might be. After the meeting, Emma spent the next several weeks working tirelessly to implement the changes. She coordinated with security teams to ensure all sensitive data was protected, streamlined communication channels, and worked directly with legal teams to ensure the proper steps were taken to prevent further leaks. As the days passed, she began to see the fruits of her labor. Employees started to trust the company again. The media buzz died down, replaced by stories of recovery and growth. Slowly, the company began to regain its footing. But the most significant change wasn't in the company, it was in Emma herself. She had learned more about herself in these few weeks than she had in the entire year since joining the team. The pressure, the betrayal, the constant challenges, they had all shaped her into someone stronger, someone more capable. She had seen the worst side of the business world, and she had emerged victorious. One afternoon, as she sat at her desk, reviewing the latest reports, Trump walked in. He looked at her for a moment, studying her with that intense gaze of his. Then, he spoke. "You've done well, Emma," he said, his tone serious. "You've proven you're not just a survivor. You're a leader. I knew it the moment I met you." Emma looked up from her desk, her eyes meeting his. She had always respected Trump, but in that moment, his words meant more than anything. She wasn't just a project or a tool to him. She was an equal, someone he could rely on. The feeling was mutual. "Thank you," Emma replied, her voice quiet but filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without your support. You pushed me to be better, to trust myself." Trump nodded. "You're welcome. But don't forget, Emma, this is just the beginning. There's a lot more ahead. You've learned a lot, but there's still more to master." Emma smiled, a sense of clarity washing over her. She had come so far since she first walked into Trump Tower, uncertain and afraid of what lay ahead. She had faced betrayal, doubt, and pressure, but she had never given up. She was stronger for it, and she knew that whatever came next, she was ready. As the days passed, Emma's confidence continued to grow. She was no longer just the woman who had been given a chance. She was the woman who had earned it. And as the company moved forward from the crisis, Emma knew that she, too, was moving forward, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. In this chapter, Emma reflects on the aftermath of Mark's betrayal and the process of rebuilding trust within the company. While the situation initially shook her, Emma finds strength in herself and the support of Trump, who continues to believe in her abilities. This chapter highlights Emma's growth and resilience, as she not only helps restore the company but also discovers her own capacity to lead. Her transformation from a vulnerable newcomer to a confident leader is fully realized, and the journey ahead promises new challenges and opportunities for growth. The aftermath of Mark's betrayal had barely settled when Emma found herself facing a new threat, one that was far more insidious and harder to detect than anything she had encountered before. The company was regaining its stability, the media frenzy had died down, and employees were beginning to trust again. However, Emma couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was still lurking in the shadows. Despite all the efforts to tighten security and restore the company's reputation, Emma felt a strange sense of unease. It wasn't just the external threats or the lingering whispers of discontent. There was something, or someone, she couldn't quite put her finger on, but she was beginning to suspect that the betrayal wasn't the last of the troubles lurking within the walls of Trump Tower. It started with a series of anonymous emails that had been circulating in the company's internal system. At first, they seemed harmless, complaints about minor policies, feedback on office practices. But soon, the tone grew more hostile, the accusations more pointed. Whoever was behind these messages seemed to know intimate details about the company's inner workings, about confidential projects that only a handful of people should have known about. Emma's instincts told her that the threat wasn't over. It had merely evolved. She called a meeting with Trump to discuss her concerns. When she arrived at his office, the usual air of confidence surrounding him was replaced with a tense silence. Trump was reading through a report when she walked in, his expression unreadable. "Trump," Emma began, her voice firm but cautious. "I've been getting reports of some suspicious activity. There are anonymous emails being sent to our employees. They're questioning our leadership, our policies, everything we've been working to rebuild. Someone's trying to undermine us from the inside." Trump's eyes narrowed as he looked up at her. "I've seen the emails, too. It's like they're feeding off our vulnerabilities." Emma took a deep breath. "I'm afraid this isn't just about disgruntled employees. This feels like a calculated move, a new threat that's coming from within." Trump's gaze hardened. "So we have a new enemy, huh? Someone trying to destabilize us from the inside." Emma nodded. "I think they're still close to the company, maybe even someone we trust. And the timing of these emails is too precise. Whoever is behind them is watching us closely." Trump leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "We'll have to handle this quietly. We can't afford another scandal. But we also can't let whoever is behind this go unchecked." Emma agreed, her mind already racing through the possibilities. "We need to track the source of the emails, figure out who is behind them. But we can't let the person know we're onto them. If we move too quickly, they might destroy evidence, or worse, escalate things." Trump's eyes gleamed with determination. "We'll do this the right way. But we need to act fast. I'm counting on you to lead this investigation, Emma. We can't afford any more mistakes." The pressure of the moment didn't escape Emma. Mark's betrayal had been personal, but this new threat felt different. It wasn't just about a single individual. It was about the integrity of the company, the very foundation they had worked so hard to rebuild. And this time, Emma knew she had to be even more strategic. She couldn't allow her emotions to cloud her judgment. "We'll start by isolating the source," Emma said, her voice calm but determined. "We'll work with the IT team to trace the emails, see if they can find any patterns or connections. And we'll have to keep this under wraps. The last thing we need is for this to leak to the press." Trump nodded. "Keep it low-key. We don't need to raise alarms just yet. But, Emma, I need you to be prepared. Whoever is behind this isn't playing by the rules. This won't be easy." As she left Trump's office, Emma felt the weight of the task ahead. She was once again stepping into uncharted territory, but this time, the stakes were even higher. Mark's betrayal had been devastating, but this new enemy, this invisible threat, was much more dangerous. She had no idea who it was or what they wanted, but one thing was clear. They would stop at nothing to bring the company down. The investigation into the source of the emails began immediately. Emma worked closely with the IT team, combing through logs, tracking IP addresses, and analyzing patterns in the messages. Every lead she followed seemed to lead to a dead end, and frustration began to mount. The anonymous sender had covered their tracks meticulously, but Emma wasn't one to give up easily. Over the course of several weeks, Emma discovered a pattern in the emails. They weren't just random complaints or suggestions. They were carefully crafted to target specific people within the organization, exploiting their weaknesses and insecurities. The sender was playing a game, sowing division among the ranks. And Emma realized that the goal wasn't just to spread rumors. It was to turn the company's own employees against each other. One evening, as Emma sat at her desk, going over the latest batch of emails, a breakthrough occurred. She noticed a pattern in the way the messages were phrased, a subtle, yet distinct writing style that seemed familiar. It wasn't just the content of the emails. It was the way they were structured, the language used. It was someone who had been with the company long enough to know its inner workings, someone who could manipulate people with precision. Emma's heart sank as the realization hit her. This was no ordinary insider. This was someone close to Trump, someone with power and influence. The puzzle pieces began to fall into place, and Emma's mind raced as she considered the implications. Whoever was behind this had the resources to execute such a detailed campaign of sabotage. And the fact that they were targeting specific individuals suggested they were trying to manipulate the company's power structure. This was a much bigger threat than she had anticipated. The next step was clear. Emma had to confront the person behind the emails before they could do any more damage. But who could it be? Who within the company had the motive and the means to pull this off? As she mulled over the possibilities, Emma realized that the enemy wasn't someone from outside the company. It was someone from within, someone who had been hiding in plain sight. In this chapter, Emma faces an even greater challenge, an anonymous insider threat working to destabilize the company from within. The emails cause division and confusion, and Emma realizes that the betrayal she thought was behind her is far from over. The tension mounts as she uncovers the calculated nature of the new threat, and the chapter sets the stage for a high-stakes investigation as Emma works to uncover the identity of this hidden enemy. The stakes have never been higher, and Emma's ability to stay calm under pressure will be crucial as the battle for the company's future intensifies. The days following Emma's realization were filled with a sense of urgency. The investigation had taken a darker turn, and the pressure on her shoulders seemed to grow heavier with every passing hour. She had been in high-stakes situations before, but this felt different. The internal sabotage was coming from someone who knew the company inside and out, someone with enough knowledge to manipulate the very foundation of what they had worked so hard to rebuild. As the weeks dragged on, Emma found herself working late into the nights, poring over the emails and searching for patterns that could lead her to the culprit. She relied heavily on the IT department, and together, they carefully analyzed every possible angle. Every lead seemed to slip through their fingers like sand, but Emma refused to give up. She had come this far. She wasn't about to let this enemy win. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma sat alone in the office, reviewing yet another set of suspicious emails. A cold chill crept down her spine as she reread one of the messages. It was subtle, but there it was again. Something familiar in the writing, something that gnawed at the back of her mind. "Is this a coincidence?" she murmured to herself, her fingers tapping nervously on the edge of her desk. She zoomed in on one specific phrase, a set of words she had seen before, words only one person in the company, besides herself, would use. A faint memory stirred. Emma's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? She pulled up a list of key employees, scrolling through their names and titles. Her eyes landed on one name, Sarah Montgomery, the company's senior director of strategy. Sarah had been with the company for years, and Emma had always admired her sharp mind and strategic thinking. But lately, something had been off. Sarah had been acting strange, distant, almost too careful in her interactions. Emma remembered the subtle shifts in Sarah's behavior over the last few months, the way she had avoided certain conversations, and how she would sometimes give too many details when they weren't needed. The more Emma thought about it, the more it made sense. Sarah had been one of the first people to question the company's new direction, voicing concerns during meetings that others simply didn't share. And now, the emails, targeting employees who had been part of the company's growth, undermining key figures, seemed to fit Sarah's subtle method of manipulation. Emma's thoughts raced as she realized that Sarah wasn't just an innocent bystander in the company's upheaval. She was likely the mastermind behind the anonymous emails. But Emma couldn't act on suspicion alone. She needed proof, and she knew that taking the wrong step could jeopardize everything. She immediately called a late-night meeting with Trump, her mind already made up about the next course of action. She couldn't afford to hesitate. Trump's office was quiet, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. When Emma walked in, she could tell by the tense expression on Trump's face that he had been up thinking about the situation as well. The weight of the ongoing threat hung heavily between them. "I've been thinking," Emma said, settling into the chair across from Trump. "I believe we've been looking at this all wrong. The emails, they're coming from someone within our inner circle, someone with close access to sensitive information." Trump raised an eyebrow. "You think it's an insider?" Emma nodded. "I do, and I think I know who it is." Trump leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Who?" "Sarah Montgomery," Emma said quietly. "She's been manipulating things from the inside, sowing division, and creating chaos in a way that's very calculated. It fits her pattern. I've seen the way she's been acting, how she's been questioning our leadership and making subtle moves behind the scenes." Trump sat back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Sarah, I never saw it coming, but you're sure?" Emma hesitated. "I can't be 100% sure, but everything points to her. The writing style in the emails, the timing of them, it all aligns. And she's been pushing the company's agenda in a way that feels forced." Trump's jaw tightened. "So what do we do now?" Emma took a deep breath. "We confront her, but carefully. We can't afford to let her know we're onto her until we have enough evidence. We need to play it smart." Trump's eyes locked with hers, and for a moment, Emma saw a flicker of doubt in his gaze. "This is risky, Emma. If we're wrong, it could backfire. But I trust you. If you're sure about this, then let's proceed with caution." Emma nodded, her resolve hardening. The next few days would be crucial. They couldn't let Sarah know they were onto her. The stakes were too high. If Sarah was indeed behind the sabotage, she had already proven that she would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. Emma knew that this time, the battle wouldn't just be about business. It would be a fight for the company's survival. The investigation into Sarah Montgomery began quietly, with Emma and her team carefully monitoring her movements and interactions. They tracked her emails, watched her meetings, and even conducted interviews with those who worked closely with her. Every step had to be calculated. Every move had to be precise. One wrong move could send Sarah into hiding, making it impossible to catch her. It didn't take long for Emma to uncover more troubling details. Sarah had been in frequent communication with external contacts, people Emma had never seen before, and her emails with them were suspiciously encrypted. As Emma dug deeper, she uncovered a series of transactions that linked Sarah to an external company that had been involved in some shady dealings. The evidence was mounting, and Emma knew that she was getting closer to the truth. Then, one evening, Emma received an anonymous tip that would change everything. The source claimed to have witnessed Sarah meeting with an investor who had been interested in buying out the company, someone who had a history of attempting to dismantle corporations for personal gain. Emma's blood ran cold. If Sarah was conspiring with external enemies, this was far worse than she had imagined. It was time to act. In this chapter, Emma unravels the mystery behind the sabotage, uncovering a hidden enemy, Sarah Montgomery, a trusted member of the company's leadership. The tension mounts as Emma gathers the evidence and prepares to confront Sarah, knowing that the stakes are higher than ever. The chapter highlights the growing complexity of Emma's challenges and sets the stage for a high-stakes confrontation that will test her leadership, intelligence, and ability to protect the company she's worked so hard to save. The night air felt heavy, thick with anticipation, as Emma paced in her office. The investigation was finally reaching a breaking point. She had gathered enough evidence to confront Sarah Montgomery, but the weight of the moment still loomed over her. The walls felt as though they were closing in. She could almost hear the ticking of the clock, counting down to the inevitable confrontation that would either expose the truth or tear the company apart. The anonymous tip about Sarah's dealings with an investor interested in buying out the company had shaken Emma to her core. It meant that Sarah wasn't just acting out of discontent or ambition. She was actively working with outsiders to destroy everything Emma and Trump had fought to rebuild. The betrayal was more than personal. It was a full-scale attack on everything they had built. If Sarah's plans went unchecked, the company could be torn apart from the inside. Emma knew that she had to confront Sarah directly. But there was no room for mistakes. This wasn't just about proving Sarah's guilt. It was about ensuring that the company would survive. If Sarah was the mastermind behind this sabotage, then the trust of the entire organization was at stake. How would the employees react once they learned their senior leader had been plotting against them? The ramifications could be catastrophic, not only for Sarah but for the company's future. Emma stood up from her desk, her hands trembling slightly as she straightened her blazer. She had to do this. For the company. For everything they had worked so hard to build. She dialed Trump's number and waited as it rang. The phone clicked, and Trump's voice came through, steady and calm. "Emma," he said, sensing the urgency in her tone. "What's happening?" "I'm ready," she replied, her voice firm. "I've got everything. We're going to confront her." There was a moment of silence on the other end. Emma could hear Trump taking a deep breath before he responded. "Are you sure, Emma? If we move too fast, she could slip away. Or worse, she could turn this around on us." Emma paused, her mind racing. He was right. This wasn't just about exposing Sarah's deceit. It was about preventing any damage to the company's reputation. But Emma had no choice. Time was running out. I'm sure. I've got her. Trump. We can't wait any longer. We have to act. Trump hesitated again, then finally said, All right. I'm with you. Let's end this tonight. The plan was set in motion. Emma and Trump decided to meet with Sarah in a secure conference room, away from prying eyes. The walls were soundproof, the air thick with tension as they waited for Sarah to arrive. Emma couldn't help but wonder if Sarah had known this was coming. She was a master of manipulation. Perhaps she had been watching Emma's every move, anticipating the confrontation before it even happened. When Sarah walked into the room, she seemed unfazed, as if nothing was wrong. Her sharp, calculating eyes scanned the room before settling on Emma and Trump. She gave them a small, practiced smile, though there was a slight tightness around her mouth. An unconscious tell, Emma noted, that gave away a hint of nervousness. Emma, Trump, Sarah greeted them with an air of casualness. I wasn't expecting a late-night meeting. What's this about? Emma didn't waste any time. She stood up, meeting Sarah's gaze with unwavering confidence. We know what you've been doing, Sarah, she said, her voice steady, though every word felt like it was charged with electric tension. We know you've been working against the company, and we know you've been in contact with outside investors to bring us down. Sarah's eyes flickered for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms in a defensive posture. I have no idea what you're talking about, Emma. These are serious accusations. You think I'm just going to stand here and let you lie to me? Emma shot back. We've traced your emails. We've seen the encrypted communications. We know about the meetings with those investors. You've been plotting to dismantle the company from the inside. Trump finally spoke up, his tone hard and authoritative. You've been playing a dangerous game, Sarah. This ends tonight. We've already contacted the legal team. Sarah's expression shifted, just slightly. A flicker of fear, perhaps. But she was quick to mask it with defiance. You don't understand, Trump. I'm doing what's best for the company. You've let things slip through your fingers, and now the company is on the verge of collapse. I'm the only one who can save it. Emma shook her head, her disbelief almost palpable. No, Sarah. You're the one who's been tearing it apart. You've been creating chaos, dividing the team, and now you're trying to hand the company over to people who only want to destroy it. For a brief moment, the facade cracked. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Her lips curled into a bitter smile. You don't get it, do you? I've been trying to save us from people like you. The company is too big, too bloated. The foundation is weak, and I'm the only one who can take it to the next level. Emma's chest tightened as she realized just how deeply Sarah had been deceiving herself. You don't understand, Sarah. This isn't about saving the company. It's about your own ego. You were too eager to take control, to become the person in charge. Sarah's smirk faltered, and for the first time in their conversation, she looked uncertain. Emma could see the cracks beginning to show, the weight of her own lies pressing down on her. But there was no turning back now. I have the evidence, Emma continued. You've been in contact with investors who've tried to break up the company. You've been undermining us from the inside. And now it's over. Sarah's expression faltered, and for a moment, Emma could see the cold calculation in her eyes. But before she could say another word, Trump leaned in, his voice cutting through the tension. Sarah, you're done. We have the evidence to take this to the authorities, and it's only a matter of time before everything you've done comes to light. For the first time, Sarah looked defeated. Her shoulders slumped as the weight of the situation finally seemed to crash down on her. She had been exposed, and there was no escaping the consequences now. I didn't want it to come to this, Sarah said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. I thought I was doing the right thing. Emma gave a short, bitter laugh. You thought you could play us, but you were the one who got played. Now, it's time to pay the price. In this chapter, Emma and Trump confront Sarah Montgomery, the person behind the sabotage within the company. The tension is palpable as Emma and Trump lay out the evidence against Sarah, who initially denies the accusations before her facade crumbles. Sarah's motivations are revealed, and her betrayal is finally exposed. The chapter marks a pivotal turning point in the story, with the company's future hanging in the balance. Emma's determination to protect the company and uncover the truth has finally led her to this moment, but the repercussions of Sarah's actions are far from over. The room was silent after Sarah's confession. The weight of her betrayal hung heavy in the air, suffocating the space around them. Emma sat across from her, her hands gripping the edge of the table. She had never imagined that someone she had trusted so deeply, someone who had been a part of the team for so long, could betray them in such a way. The revelation left her feeling hollow, as if the foundation she had worked so hard to build had suddenly cracked beneath her feet. Trump stood by the window, his back to the room, looking out over the city. He hadn't said much after Sarah's confession, but Emma could tell he was processing everything, calculating the next steps. The company's reputation was at stake, and there was no room for error. Emma knew that whatever decision they made now would affect not only the company's future, but also the trust of the employees who had stood by them. "Sarah," Emma finally spoke, breaking the silence. "What you've done isn't just an attack on the company. It's an attack on every person who believed in us, who fought with us. You've endangered everything we've worked for." Sarah's gaze was fixed on the table, her face pale, her lips trembling. Sarah's smirk faltered, and for the first time in their conversation, she looked uncertain. Emma could see the cracks beginning to show, the weight of her own lies pressing down on her. But there was no turning back now. "I have the evidence," Emma continued. "You've been in contact with investors who've tried to break up the company. You've been undermining us from the inside. And now it's over." Sarah's expression faltered, and for a moment, Emma could see the cold calculation in her eyes. But before she could say another word, Trump leaned in, his voice cutting through the tension. "Sarah, you're done. We have the evidence to take this to the authorities, and it's only a matter of time before everything you've done comes to light." For the first time, Sarah looked defeated. Her shoulders slumped as the weight of the situation finally seemed to crash down on her. She had been exposed, and there was no escaping the consequences now. "I didn't want it to come to this," Sarah said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "I thought I was doing the right thing." Emma gave a short, bitter laugh. "You thought you could play us, but you were the one who got played. Now, it's time to pay the price." In this chapter, Emma and Trump confront Sarah Montgomery, the person behind the sabotage within the company. The tension is palpable as Emma and Trump lay out the evidence against Sarah, who initially denies the accusations before her facade crumbles. Sarah's motivations are revealed, and her betrayal is finally exposed. The chapter marks a pivotal turning point in the story, with the company's future hanging in the balance. Emma's determination to protect the company and uncover the truth has finally led her to this moment, but the repercussions of Sarah's actions are far from over. The room was silent after Sarah's confession. The weight of her betrayal hung heavy in the air, suffocating the space around them. Emma sat across from her, her hands gripping the edge of the table. She had never imagined that someone she had trusted so deeply, someone who had been a part of the team for so long, could betray them in such a way. The revelation left her feeling hollow, as if the foundation she had worked so hard to build had suddenly cracked beneath her feet. Trump stood by the window, his back to the room, looking out over the city. He hadn't said much after Sarah's confession, but Emma could tell he was processing everything, calculating the next steps. The company's reputation was at stake, and there was no room for error. Emma knew that whatever decision they made now would affect not only the company's future, but also the trust of the employees who had stood by them. "Sarah," Emma finally spoke, breaking the silence. "What you've done isn't just an attack on the company. It's an attack on every person who believed in us, who fought with us. You've endangered everything we've worked for." Sarah's gaze was fixed on the table, her face pale, her lips trembling. She looked broken, but Emma knew better than to feel sympathy. Betrayal ran too deep. "I never meant for it to go this far," Sarah muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I was doing what was best for the company. I thought I could make things better." "You were blinded by ambition," Trump said, his voice cold. "You wanted power, Sarah. You were willing to sacrifice everything, even the people who trusted you, for the chance to control it all." Sarah looked up at him, her eyes pleading. "I didn't want to hurt anyone. I thought the company was dying. I thought that if I didn't do something, it would all crumble." Emma shook her head, her anger rising. "But you weren't trying to save the company. You were trying to destroy it so you could take control. The investors you were working with, the meetings behind our backs, the emails you sent, everything you did was a betrayal." Sarah's shoulders slumped, and for a moment, she looked as though she might collapse under the weight of the situation. The confident, calculating woman who had once been an asset to the company now seemed small and fragile, but Emma's resolve didn't waver. Sarah had made her choices, and now it was time for the consequences to follow. Emma turned to Trump. "We can't let this go. If we do, it will send the wrong message. We need to act now." Trump nodded, his expression hardening. "Agreed. We need to protect the company. We need to cut all ties with her and move forward. We'll take this to the board and let them make the final decision. But as of now, Sarah, you're no longer part of this company. Your actions have destroyed the trust we once had in you." Sarah's face turned crimson, but she didn't argue. The reality of her situation was sinking in, and there was no escape from the truth now. "I'll pack my things," Sarah said quietly, her voice hollow. She stood up, her movements slow and deliberate, as though the weight of her own guilt was too much to bear. She glanced at Emma one last time, her eyes filled with regret. "I thought I could fix things, but I've ruined everything." Emma didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The betrayal had been too great, and no words could undo the damage Sarah had caused. As Sarah left the room, Emma felt a pang of emptiness, but she quickly pushed it aside. She couldn't afford to dwell on the past, not when there was so much work to be done. The company still needed her, and she wasn't going to let Sarah's treachery tear it down. Trump turned to Emma, his expression unreadable. "You did the right thing." "I don't feel like I did," Emma said softly. "I wanted to believe that Sarah had our best interests at heart. I never thought she'd do something like this." "You can't blame yourself," Trump said, his voice firm. "You did what had to be done. We couldn't afford to let her destroy what we've built." Emma nodded, though the weight of the decision still pressed on her chest. The company had just survived a major threat, but the road ahead was far from clear. Sarah had already made her move, and the fallout was just beginning. The following days were filled with a flurry of meetings. Emma and Trump had to deal with the aftermath of Sarah's betrayal, informing the board, reassessing security measures, and making sure that no further damage could be done. The company's reputation had taken a hit, but Emma knew that they could recover if they acted quickly and decisively. But recovery would not come without cost. Emma knew that trust had been shattered. Employees were already whispering behind closed doors, and rumors were spreading like wildfire. People wanted to know how deep the betrayal went and who else might be involved. The investigation into Sarah's actions was ongoing, and Emma knew that there was more to uncover. Sarah hadn't been working alone. She had been part of a much larger scheme, and Emma was determined to get to the bottom of it. In the days that followed, Emma spent countless hours in meetings with HR, legal teams, and the board. They worked tirelessly to reassure the employees that the company was safe and that steps were being taken to prevent any further sabotage. The trust of the team was vital, and Emma had to find a way to rebuild it from the ground up. But as the dust settled, a new question began to haunt her. Was Sarah the only one involved, or were there others in the company who had been complicit in the plot to tear them apart? The truth was still out there, lurking in the shadows. And Emma knew that she couldn't rest until it was all exposed. In this chapter, the fallout from Sarah's betrayal hits hard. Emma and Trump make the difficult decision to cut ties with Sarah, and the company begins the process of recovering from the damage caused. The tension within the company is palpable, and Emma finds herself facing the challenge of rebuilding trust. As the investigation continues, Emma is forced to confront the reality that Sarah may not have been working alone, and the threat to the company may still be far from over. The chapter emphasizes the emotional and professional toll that betrayal can take and sets the stage for a deeper investigation into the conspiracy. The weight of the last few days pressed heavily on Emma's shoulders. The company was in turmoil, not just because of Sarah's betrayal, but because the larger question loomed overhead. Who else was involved? She couldn't shake the feeling that the story didn't end with Sarah, that there were deeper forces at play within the company. The more she thought about it, the more certain she became. There was more to this than a lone wolf making dangerous moves for power. There had to be others involved. In the wake of Sarah's departure, Emma and Trump held a closed-door meeting with the legal team to discuss the next steps. They had already begun working with investigators, combing through emails, meeting notes, and even social media connections that might link Sarah to other insiders. Emma was determined to leave no stone unturned. "I still can't believe she would go this far," Emma said, her voice tinged with frustration. "The things she's done, trying to dismantle everything we've worked so hard for. It's not just about business. It's personal. It feels like a betrayal on a level I didn't think was possible." Trump sat across from her, his arms crossed. His expression was more composed, though his eyes showed the exhaustion he had been carrying over the past few days. "We'll find out who else is behind this. I don't think Sarah was working alone. This didn't happen overnight, Emma. It had to be months in the making." Emma nodded, deep in thought. "The problem is, we don't even know where to start. Sarah kept a lot of things hidden, and it's hard to pinpoint who she might have been communicating with, especially after everything we've uncovered so far. The way she tried to manipulate everyone around her. It's more than just corporate strategy. It's manipulation at its core." "We need to start asking the right questions," Trump said, his tone shifting from frustration to focus. "Look at who she was close to. Look at who was benefiting from her actions. We'll figure it out. One thing is certain. She wasn't the mastermind alone. There's a network, and we'll expose it." They spent hours reviewing every detail, working through piles of documents, trying to identify any patterns that might point to Sarah's collaborators. Emma's mind kept drifting back to the way Sarah had behaved during their confrontation, calm, but with a slight hesitation when pressed. It was the hesitation of someone who knew they couldn't hide the truth much longer. But even with the mounting evidence against Sarah, Emma couldn't shake the sinking feeling in her stomach. What if they were overlooking something bigger? What if the company had been compromised more deeply than anyone realized? Days passed, and the investigation continued with relentless scrutiny. Emma met with various department heads, including HR, IT, and finance, trying to piece together any potential gaps that might have allowed Sarah and her associates to operate in secrecy. The pressure of the task was immense. She had to act quickly, but she couldn't afford to make a mistake. It was during one of these meetings that Emma received an unexpected call. It was from one of her most trusted colleagues, Kyle, the head of IT. "Emma, I need to talk to you about something," Kyle said urgently. "I've been going through the system logs, and there's something strange. I found a backdoor in the system that was active up until just a few days ago. It was a high-level access point, and it looks like it was used to transmit data. I think someone's been using it to funnel company secrets." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Are you saying someone within the company has been stealing information?" "I don't have all the details yet," Kyle replied, "but I've traced some of the activity. The backdoor was set up with an encrypted protocol that made it nearly impossible to detect. It's sophisticated, Emma. This wasn't someone hacking from the outside. It was an inside job." Emma's mind raced. Could it be? Could someone within the company have been working with Sarah all along? "Do you have any idea who was involved?" "I'm still tracking the activity, but based on the access points, it looks like it was someone with high-level access. Only a few people would have the clearance to do this." Emma's stomach churned. It was one thing to deal with Sarah's betrayal. It was another to realize that someone within the company had been actively aiding her. If there was another person involved, they had to act fast before any more damage was done. "Keep digging," Emma ordered. "Let me know as soon as you find anything concrete. I'll handle the rest." Emma felt the weight of the discovery hanging over her as she sat at her desk. The thought that there was more than one person working against them gnawed at her. If the system had been compromised, what else had Sarah managed to corrupt? How much damage had been done? As if on cue, Trump entered the room. His presence was like a grounding force, but Emma could see the strain on his face. The pressure was getting to them both. "You heard from Kyle?" he asked, his voice low. Emma nodded. "There's been a backdoor in the system. Someone's been leaking company secrets. We don't know who yet, but it's not just Sarah." Trump clenched his jaw, his eyes narrowing. "This just keeps getting worse. We need to track down the leak and make sure they can't do any more damage." But the damage done so far is already substantial. We can't let this go on any longer. We need to act before we lose control." Emma agreed. "We'll find them. We'll track down every last piece of evidence until we uncover who's really behind this. We can't afford to let anyone else tear down what we've built." The search for answers continued, and the pressure to solve the mystery of the leak intensified. With each passing hour, the sense of urgency grew. Sarah's departure was just the beginning. Emma realized that she and Trump were now engaged in a far deeper battle than they had ever anticipated. There was a mole in their midst, someone who had been using the company's resources to undermine everything they stood for. The next few days were filled with late nights and intense focus. Every meeting, every piece of data, every line of communication, Emma scrutinized it all. She wasn't just looking for answers, she was hunting for the truth. But the deeper she dug, the more unsettling the discoveries became. The web of deceit stretched farther than she had imagined. And somewhere, hidden within the shadows, the real mastermind was still watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. In this chapter, the investigation into Sarah's betrayal uncovers an even deeper conspiracy within the company. Emma learns of a hidden backdoor in the system that was used to leak company secrets, and it becomes clear that Sarah was not the only one involved. As Emma and Trump race to uncover the identity of the person behind the leak, the stakes grow higher. With each new discovery, the danger to the company escalates, and Emma must confront the reality that they are dealing with a much larger threat than anyone initially realized. The search for the truth intensifies, setting the stage for the next confrontation. The days stretched into endless hours of digging through records, analyzing emails, and tracking down every possible lead. Emma's mind was exhausted, the weight of the investigation pushing her to the brink. Every small breakthrough seemed to lead to more questions, and the deeper she dug, the more tangled the web of betrayal became. But Emma knew one thing for certain. The mole within the company was out there, and it was only a matter of time before they were unmasked. It was late into the evening when Kyle finally called her into the IT department. The tension was palpable as he sat at his desk, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he sifted through the final traces of the encrypted data. "I think I found the key," Kyle said, his voice tight with anticipation. Emma walked over, her heart pounding in her chest. "What do you mean? Have you traced the leak?" Kyle nodded, turning the screen towards her. "It's someone in upper management. Someone with access to everything. Someone you know well." Emma's stomach dropped as she saw the name on the screen. "No, it can't be." Her breath caught in her throat. There, in black and white, was a series of communications between Sarah and someone she had trusted, a close colleague. The emails were detailed, containing sensitive company data and plans, clearly designed to sabotage the company's operations. The name that appeared again and again on the logs was none other than Greg Matthews, the company's COO. Her mind raced. Greg? How could it be? He had always been a reliable ally, a strong leader, someone Emma had depended on through every challenge the company had faced. To think that he could be involved in something so sinister was unfathomable. "Are you sure?" Emma asked, her voice shaking. She felt the ground beneath her tremble, the world seeming to spin as the truth began to settle in. "I'm sure," Kyle said grimly. "I've tracked the IP addresses. It's his account. He's been working with Sarah the entire time, feeding her the data she needed to bring us down. All the files, all the confidential reports, it's all there. He's the one who opened the back door to the system." Emma felt a wave of disbelief crash over her. She had trusted Greg, confided in him, and now she was faced with the cruel reality that he had been betraying her all along. Her emotions swirled: anger, shock, hurt, but above all, a deep sense of betrayal that she had never imagined she would feel from someone she had considered a friend and a mentor. "We need to confront him," Emma said, her voice cold with resolve. "We can't let this go any further." Kyle nodded, his expression equally grim. "I've already notified security. They'll be ready." The confrontation with Greg was set for the following morning. Emma barely slept that night, her mind reeling with the implications of what had just come to light. In the early hours, she prepared herself for what was to come, dressing in a crisp suit and pulling her hair back into a tight ponytail, her face steely with determination. She had to be strong. There was no room for weakness now. Trump, who had been by her side through every twist and turn, walked into her office just before the meeting was scheduled to start. His expression was serious, but there was an underlying sense of resolve in his eyes. He knew how personal this was for Emma. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. Emma nodded, her gaze steady. "I have to be." Together, they walked toward the conference room, where Greg was already waiting, his arms crossed and his face unreadable. When Emma entered, he didn't immediately acknowledge her, his eyes focused on the table in front of him. His demeanor was calm, almost as if he hadn't just been caught betraying the very company he had helped build. Emma took a deep breath and sat down across from him, her heart pounding in her chest. "Greg," she began, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "We need to talk?" Greg finally looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "I know what this is about." Emma's blood ran cold. "Do you?" He didn't flinch, but there was a faint smirk on his face that made her skin crawl. "I knew it was only a matter of time before you found out." "Why?" Emma asked, her voice cracking slightly despite her best efforts to maintain control. "How could you betray me like this? You were a trusted ally, someone I considered a friend." Greg leaned back in his chair, his arms still crossed. He looked at her with a mixture of indifference and something else, something darker. "You were too naive, Emma, too trusting. You thought that everything you were doing was for the right reasons, but you were only holding the company back. I had to take action." "Take action?" Emma repeated, her mind struggling to comprehend his words. "You've been working with Sarah to destroy everything we've built, to steal from this company. You've endangered everyone's livelihood. What is this, Greg? What do you want?" Greg's smirk deepened. "I want control. I want power. This company deserves more than what you've been able to give it. You've been making all the wrong moves, Emma. You've been playing it safe, afraid to take risks. I wasn't. I did what needed to be done to save us all." Emma felt her anger rise, but she kept her composure. "You didn't save anyone, Greg. You sold out everyone who trusted you. You're no better than Sarah, no better than the people who would destroy everything we've worked for just to get ahead." Greg shrugged, unbothered. "It's business. You wouldn't understand." "Don't talk to me about business," Emma snapped, her voice rising now. "You've gone behind my back, and you've compromised the security of everything we've worked for. You're done." Trump, who had been silently observing the exchange, finally spoke up. "We'll be reporting this to the board and to the authorities, Greg. You'll answer for your actions." Greg's eyes narrowed. "You think you've won? This isn't over, Emma. You're just a pawn in a much bigger game." Emma stood up, her voice unwavering. "No, Greg. This is where it ends. You're out. And when we're through with you, everyone will know what you've done." As the security team escorted Greg out of the building, Emma felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. The truth was out. The mole had been exposed, and the company was one step closer to reclaiming its stability. But as Greg was led away, Emma couldn't help but wonder, had she really gotten to the bottom of this? Was Greg truly the only one pulling the strings? Or was there still more to uncover? In this chapter, the truth about the mole is finally revealed. Greg Matthews, the company's COO, has been working with Sarah all along, leaking sensitive information and trying to bring down everything Emma had worked so hard to build. The confrontation is intense, with Greg revealing his desire for power and control over the company. Emma is forced to confront the harsh reality of betrayal, not just from Sarah, but from someone she considered a friend. However, even as Greg is exposed, Emma realizes that the battle is far from over, and the stakes have just been raised even higher. The fallout from Greg's betrayal was swift and unforgiving. The company was thrown into chaos as Emma and Trump worked tirelessly to address the damage. Employees were in shock, and the news of Greg's involvement spread like wildfire through the corporate world. Emma felt the weight of it all pressing down on her. Her trust had been shattered, and the repercussions of Greg's actions threatened to undo everything they had built. But the truth was out, and now it was time to rebuild. Still, as much as she wanted to focus on stabilizing the company, a gnawing feeling of unease refused to let her rest. Greg's confession had been unsettling, but his cryptic words still echoed in her mind. You're just a pawn in a much bigger game. That haunting statement lingered in her thoughts. Was Greg truly the mastermind behind the scheme, or was there someone else orchestrating the chaos from behind the scenes? Emma couldn't shake the feeling that the full story wasn't over yet. If there was a bigger game being played, she needed to find out who was pulling the strings. The following morning, Emma and Trump met with their legal and security teams to determine their next steps. The situation was delicate, and Emma had no illusions about how much was at stake. They had to be careful. Too many people were watching, and the last thing they needed was more leaks. We need to take control of the narrative, Trump said, his voice sharp. The board is demanding answers, and the media will be all over this. We can't let this spiral out of control. Emma nodded, agreeing. We have to show that we're still in charge, that we can manage this crisis. But we can't ignore what Greg said. A bigger game. We need to understand what he meant by that. Kyle, who had been quietly observing the conversation, spoke up. I've been doing some more digging into Greg's activities. It's worse than we thought. I found records of him meeting with external contacts, people outside the company, ones we've never heard of before. I'm starting to think that Greg wasn't acting alone. There's someone else involved in this. Emma's stomach tightened. Not alone? The thought that Greg had collaborators outside the company made her feel like the ground beneath her feet was constantly shifting. Who are these contacts? She asked, her voice low. I don't have all the details yet, but I've traced some of the IPs to offshore accounts, Kyle continued. It's hard to pin down exactly who they are, but they're well connected in the corporate world. I think we're looking at a network, not just a rogue employee. Emma exchanged a glance with Trump. We need to follow those leads. If there's a larger network, we can't let it go unchecked. It's time to play offense. Emma and Trump spent the next several days working with their team to track down these elusive contacts. The investigation quickly grew more complicated as they uncovered more layers of secrecy. Greg had been involved with shadowy figures from overseas, individuals with ties to other companies in their industry, people who stood to gain from the downfall of Emma's company. As they pieced together the puzzle, the story became more disturbing. It wasn't just about corporate sabotage. It was about something much darker. The network that Greg had been a part of was designed to destabilize powerful companies, taking them down piece by piece for the benefit of a few. By the end of the week, Kyle had uncovered a troubling discovery. One of the people Greg had been in contact with was none other than Viktor Petrov, a well-known financier with a reputation for being involved in corporate espionage and shady dealings. Petrov's name had come up in several high-profile scandals over the years, but his connections had always remained elusive. It seemed he had found a way into Emma's company, and now she knew the reason why. We've got to move fast, Kyle said, his voice tense. Petrov is not someone you want to underestimate. If he's involved, we could be facing more than just a corporate battle. This could get dangerous. Emma clenched her fists, determination building inside her. I don't care how dangerous it gets. I will not let this company fall to the likes of him. We need to expose the entire network, and we need to do it before they can strike again. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She spent hours staring at the files on her desk, rereading the evidence Kyle had uncovered. Petrov's involvement sent a chill through her spine. He was ruthless, known for manipulating markets, undermining competitors, and using people like pawns in his game of power. As she sifted through the documents, Emma felt a pang of guilt. Had she missed the signs? Were there moments when she could have seen what was happening? She had trusted the wrong people, and now she was paying the price. But she couldn't afford to dwell on regret. There was too much at stake. The phone on her desk rang, breaking her thoughts. She picked it up quickly, hearing Kyle's voice on the other end. Emma, you're not going to believe this, Kyle said, his voice shaking with urgency. I've traced the offshore accounts, and I found something that ties Petrov directly to Greg. It's a huge deal. What is it? Emma asked, her pulse quickening. The accounts lead back to a shell company that Greg had been secretly funneling money into. And get this, the company is tied to an upcoming merger that could shake the entire industry. Petrov stands to gain a huge profit if the deal goes through, and Greg was playing a key role in making sure it happened. Emma's mind spun. So this was more than just sabotage. This was about money, about control. Exactly. Greg wasn't just trying to bring the company down. He was helping Petrov take over the industry, Kyle said. This is bigger than we thought, Emma. We need to expose this now before they can pull off the merger. It could ruin everything. The urgency of the situation hit Emma like a freight train. She knew they had to act fast, but she also knew they had to be smart. If Petrov was behind all of this, he wouldn't go down easily. He had too many resources, too many allies. But Emma wasn't about to back down. She had fought too hard to let this go. She called a meeting with Trump, Kyle, and their legal team. "We've uncovered the full scope of what's happening," she said, her voice strong. Greg was just a pawn in a much bigger game. Viktor Petrov is the mastermind behind all of this. He's been using Greg to destabilize us so he could control the industry through a merger. We need to stop this deal from happening. Trump nodded, his face hard. We'll put everything we've got into this. We'll expose Petrov and stop the merger. We can't let him win. We need to make sure the public knows the truth, Emma said, her eyes fierce. If we can get the right people on our side, we can block the merger before it even starts. We'll make sure everyone knows who Petrov really is. As they laid out their strategy, Emma felt a sense of resolve. This battle was far from over, but she was no longer fighting in the dark. She had uncovered the network, and now she would tear it down piece by piece. The fight for her company's future was just beginning. In this chapter, Emma uncovers the full extent of the conspiracy against her company. With Greg's betrayal exposing a larger network of corporate espionage, Emma realizes that Viktor Petrov, a notorious financier, is behind the plot to destabilize the company and seize control of the industry. As Emma and her team work to track down the masterminds behind the scheme, the stakes rise higher. With the merger at the center of the conspiracy, Emma must move fast to expose the truth and stop Petrov before it's too late. The battle for her company's survival is far from over, and Emma knows that it will take everything she has to come out victorious. The pressure was unbearable. Emma and her team had just uncovered the full scope of the conspiracy, but now the real battle was about to begin. With Petrov's shadowy influence looming over the industry and Greg's role as his pawn now exposed, the stakes couldn't be higher. The merger that Petrov was orchestrating could happen at any moment, and if Emma didn't act fast, it would be the final blow to everything they had worked for. "Time is running out," Trump said, his tone grim. He stood by Emma's desk, looking at the latest reports that Kyle had compiled. "We've got to move quickly if we're going to stop this merger." Emma nodded, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on her shoulders. She hadn't signed up for this kind of corporate warfare, but she couldn't back down now. Too many lives were at stake, not just her own but the livelihoods of everyone who worked for the company. And Petrov? Petrov had gone too far. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a predator, and Emma was determined to stop him. "We need to gather enough evidence to expose Petrov and stop the merger," Emma said, her voice resolute. "But we also need leverage. Petrov's not going to back down just because we've exposed his role in all of this. We need to make sure he's forced to the table." Kyle, who had been scanning through financial records, looked up. "I've been digging into Petrov's other dealings. I've found something that could give us the leverage we need, another one of his shady business deals. If we can make this public, it'll destroy his credibility and force him to reconsider the merger." "Do we have enough time?" Emma asked, her mind racing. Every minute felt like a ticking clock. If they didn't act fast, Petrov could slip away with the deal, and the damage would be irreversible. Kyle nodded, but the uncertainty in his eyes betrayed the urgency of the situation. "It's risky, but it's our best shot." Emma turned to Trump. "Let's move forward with it. We can't afford to waste any more time." The next 48 hours were a blur of strategy, action, and relentless pressure. Emma's team worked around the clock, compiling all the evidence they could find against Petrov while simultaneously trying to block the merger through legal channels. They had already alerted the board members who were still loyal to Emma, and together, they launched a multi-pronged attack, ensuring that every aspect of Petrov's web of deceit would be exposed. The media was already picking up on the story of Greg's betrayal, and Emma knew that if they could push the narrative of Petrov's illegal activities into the spotlight, they could force his hand. The financial records were damning, but they needed more than just paper trails. They needed a smoking gun. That was where the second piece of the puzzle came in: An insider from one of Petrov's other ventures had come forward. The whistleblower, a former associate of Petrov's, had been secretly working with Emma's team to gather additional proof of Petrov's involvement in several high-profile scandals. The timing couldn't have been better. The whistleblower's information was about to hit the press, and it was a bombshell that would shake Petrov to his core. As the day of reckoning approached, Emma found herself sitting in her office, staring out at the skyline. The world outside seemed unchanged, but everything inside her felt different. The company that had once been her passion, her dream, now felt like a battlefield. Every decision she made could be the one that determined the future. Trump walked in, his face unreadable. The whistleblower's statement is about to go live. It's going to be all over the news within the hour. Emma stood, her heart pounding. This is it. The moment we've been waiting for. You've done everything you could, Trump said, his voice soft but firm. You fought for what's right. No matter what happens now, you've already won. Emma gave him a brief smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. We're not done yet. Petrov's dangerous, and he's not going to go down easily. The moment the whistleblower's statement hit the media, the reaction was immediate. News outlets picked up the story like wildfire, broadcasting Petrov's shady dealings, his manipulation of markets, and his connection to the conspiracy involving Greg. Emma's team had strategically leaked the information to the right journalists, and now Petrov was facing a full-scale public relations nightmare. But even as the pressure mounted on Petrov, Emma knew that the battle wasn't over. The merger deal was still on the table, and Petrov had more than enough resources to fight back. It wasn't just a matter of exposing him anymore. It was a race against time to prevent the deal from going through. I need you to take charge of the board meeting tomorrow, Emma told Trump. We need every ally we have in that room. If we're going to stop the merger, we need to convince them that the risks outweigh the benefits. And we can't just rely on the media. We need legal action too. Trump nodded. I'll get our top lawyers involved. We'll make sure Petrov doesn't have a leg to stand on. The following day was a blur. Emma and Trump arrived early at the boardroom, a room filled with tension and uncertainty. The board members who were still loyal to Emma had gathered, and now they had to make their final pitch. The stakes were higher than ever. If they didn't stop the merger, Petrov would gain control, and Emma's company would be nothing more than a puppet in his hands. As the meeting began, Emma could feel the weight of every decision she had made coming to a head. This was the moment that would decide everything. Ladies and gentlemen, Emma began, standing at the front of the room. I know the past few weeks have been difficult and trust has been broken, but I want to remind you all of what we stand for: integrity, transparency, and the future of this company. We've uncovered evidence that Petrov has been manipulating our industry for his own gain. His merger plan is nothing more than a power grab, and we cannot allow him to succeed. She paused, letting her words sink in. We've already seen how far he's willing to go. We have a chance to stop him before it's too late. I need each and every one of you to stand with us to protect what's right. We're not just fighting for this company, we're fighting for our future. The room was silent. Emma could feel the eyes of the board members on her, some filled with doubt, others with uncertainty. But she held her ground, knowing that she had no choice but to fight with everything she had. We have the legal leverage to block the merger, and we have the evidence to expose Petrov for what he truly is. But we need your support. We need you to vote for the future of this company, for the people who have worked tirelessly to make it what it is. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, one of the board members spoke up. Emma, you've made your case. We're with you. Let's stop this merger. The room erupted in a mix of applause and murmurs of agreement. Emma felt the weight lift off her shoulders, but she knew this battle wasn't over yet. Petrov would fight back, but now they had the support they needed to stop him. In this chapter, Emma's team races against time to expose Viktor Petrov's involvement in the conspiracy and stop his merger deal. With the help of a whistleblower, Emma gathers the evidence necessary to take Petrov down. But the real battle lies in convincing the board to block the merger. As Emma prepares for the final showdown, she realizes the stakes are higher than ever. Will she succeed in protecting the company and its future, or will Petrov win? The tension continues to build as Emma takes her final stand. The boardroom was packed. The air was thick with tension as the final votes were about to be cast. This was it, the moment Emma had worked tirelessly for, the moment that would determine the future of her company and, perhaps, her entire career. She had uncovered the truth, exposed Viktor Petrov for the manipulative, power-hungry mogul he was, and now, all she needed was the support of the board to stop the merger. Emma stood at the head of the table, her hands clasped in front of her, trying to steady the nerves that threatened to overwhelm her. She could feel the weight of every gaze in the room, some skeptical, some supportive, but all waiting for her to make her final case. This was a pivotal moment, and if she failed, everything she had fought for would come crashing down. Trump stood beside her, his usual confident demeanor slightly more serious than usual. His expression was hard to read, but Emma knew he was just as invested in this outcome as she was. The room was silent, save for the sound of a few people shifting in their seats. "We've been through a lot," Emma began, her voice strong but tinged with a quiet urgency. "But one thing has become clear through all of this. Petrov isn't just some ruthless businessman trying to take over a company. He's been manipulating the entire industry for his own gain. He's been using people, lying, and pulling strings behind the scenes to control everything. We cannot let him succeed. If we allow this merger to go through, we're handing over control of this company and everything we've worked for to a man who doesn't care about its future." She paused, glancing around the room, making eye contact with the board members who had stood by her through this ordeal. "I know this has been difficult. Trust has been broken, and the path forward isn't easy. But I believe in this company. I believe in what we've built together. And I believe in the people who have stood by me. We cannot allow this merger to happen. Not for the sake of our employees, our clients, and most importantly, for our future." Emma's words hung in the air, waiting for the inevitable response. The board members murmured among themselves, their voices low and guarded. Emma felt the tension spike. This was the moment of truth. She had laid it all out on the line. If the board voted in favor of the merger, all of her efforts would have been in vain. Trump stepped forward, adding his voice to Emma's. "I've worked with Emma for years, and I can tell you this, she's right. Petrov's not interested in the future of this company. He's using it to further his own agenda, and if we don't stop him now, we'll be under his thumb for good. This merger is a risk we can't afford to take. We need to take a stand." His words seemed to resonate with the board members, some nodding in agreement, but there were still a few faces that remained neutral, their expressions unreadable. Emma's heart pounded. She couldn't afford for them to waver now, not when they were so close to stopping Petrov's plan. Finally, one of the board members, a man named Robert Stevens, cleared his throat. "Emma, Trump, I've listened to everything you've said, and I agree that we can't ignore the evidence that's come to light. But the merger with Petrov's company, it's a huge deal. There's a lot of money on the line, and a lot of people who stand to benefit. Are we really prepared to turn all of that down because of one man's ambitions?" Emma's stomach twisted. She knew what he was getting at. This wasn't just about stopping Petrov. It was about risking everything the company had worked toward. But she also knew the truth. Allowing Petrov to take over would mean losing control of everything she had fought for. "No," Emma said, her voice steady. "We're not turning it down for one man's ambitions. We're doing this because we believe in the future of this company, because we believe in what we've built together, and because we won't let anyone, no matter how powerful, dictate our future. If we let Petrov win, we lose everything." There was a long pause as the board members exchanged glances. Emma held her breath, waiting for the decision that would seal her fate. Finally, Robert Stevens spoke again. "I think we've heard enough. It's time to vote." The room fell into a tense silence as each board member cast their vote, one by one. Emma's heart hammered in her chest as the final vote was cast, the decision hanging in the air like a storm cloud. 6-4, Robert Stevens said, breaking the silence, his voice gravely serious. 4 against. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She had done it. They had done it. "We've stopped the merger," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The weight that had been pressing on her chest seemed to lift, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe. But even as the victory settled over her, Emma knew that this was far from the end. Petrov wouldn't give up easily. He would fight back. And the consequences of this battle were far from over. The future of her company and of everything she had worked for was still uncertain. The aftermath of the vote was intense. Petrov's lawyers immediately began working on a counterattack, threatening legal action to force the merger through. Petrov himself remained silent, retreating into the shadows. But Emma knew that this was far from a victory lap. It was the beginning of the end of a much larger battle. In the days that followed, Emma and her team braced for what was to come. Petrov's power was vast, and he would use every tool at his disposal to try to reverse the decision. But Emma wasn't afraid. She had faced down the most dangerous enemies before, and now she was prepared to do whatever it took to protect what she had built. As the legal battle escalated, Emma found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. From the moment she had taken the reins of the company to the shocking betrayal of Greg, she had fought for survival. She had faced manipulation, deceit, and betrayal at every turn, but she had never given up. And now, with Petrov's merger thwarted, Emma knew one thing for sure. She had just taken the first step toward reclaiming the future. In this chapter, Emma and Trump make their final stand against Viktor Petrov in a high-stakes boardroom showdown. With the merger deal on the line, Emma convinces the board to vote against the merger and stop Petrov's plan to take over the company. But even as they win this crucial battle, Emma knows that Petrov's fight is far from over. The legal battle is just beginning, and the future of the company still hangs in the balance. This is the turning point. Emma has made her move, but now, the real fight for the company's future begins. Emma sat at her desk, staring out the window of her office, the weight of victory still settling over her. It had been days since the board's vote had blocked the merger, and while it was a triumph, the euphoria was short-lived. The calm before the storm had passed. Petrov wasn't one to take defeat lying down, and everyone knew that. Emma knew that the legal battle was just beginning, and Petrov would use every tactic at his disposal to overturn the board's decision. It was only a matter of time before he'd strike back, and when he did, he would bring the full force of his resources to bear. She looked down at the stack of documents in front of her, legal briefs, press releases, financial reports. The merger was dead for now, but Petrov's grip on the industry was not. He still held power. And now that the battle lines were drawn, Emma had to figure out how to protect what was hers, and how to ensure that no one else suffered under Petrov's ruthless ambitions. Trump entered the room, his expression grim. "We've got a problem." Emma looked up, her heart sinking. "What happened?" Trump sat down across from her. "Petrov's lawyers have filed a lawsuit. He's claiming that the board's decision was illegal, that they were coerced into voting against the merger." Emma exhaled sharply. "I knew it was coming. But why now? Why not just let it go?" "He's not letting anything go," Trump said, his voice laced with frustration. "Petrov's aiming to destroy us. This lawsuit isn't just about reversing the merger. It's about discrediting us. He wants to make sure we're seen as an unstable company. He's targeting the board members who voted against the merger. He's going after everything." Emma rubbed her temples, feeling the pressure mounting. "What can we do to stop this?" Trump stood and walked over to the window, gazing out at the city skyline. "We need to go on the offensive. We can't just wait for his next move. We need to expose him further, hit him where it hurts. We have to make sure the public sees who he really is and what he's really after." Emma nodded. "The media's already reporting on the merger, but we need to make sure they know the full extent of his manipulation. It's time to dig deeper." "We've got resources," Trump said, turning back to face her. "But we need to act fast. Petrov's got powerful allies, and we can't afford to underestimate him." The next few days were a whirlwind. Emma and Trump worked tirelessly, meeting with lawyers, digging into Petrov's financial records, and talking with journalists who had already shown interest in the story. They weren't just fighting for the company anymore. They were fighting for their reputations, their credibility, and the truth. Every decision felt more urgent than the last, and each move they made was scrutinized by both their allies and enemies. Emma was determined to keep the pressure on Petrov, to expose him for what he was, a man who cared nothing for people, only for power. The legal team was relentless, finding holes in Petrov's claims and gathering more evidence to counter his accusations. Meanwhile, Emma's PR team worked around the clock to keep the public informed. The battle had gone public, and the media was beginning to take notice. Emma knew they were running out of time. One evening, as Emma sat in her office reviewing a new legal brief, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Kyle. She opened it quickly, her eyes scanning the text. "Emma, I found something you need to see. It's bigger than we thought." Her heart skipped a beat. What could be bigger than this? She immediately texted back. "What is it?" "Petrov's been laundering money through offshore accounts. We found evidence of a major financial cover-up linked to his other ventures. This could be the thing that destroys him." Emma's mind raced. This was the breakthrough they needed, the smoking gun that could end Petrov's reign for good. But it was also dangerous. Exposing this information would bring even more attention to the case, and it would escalate everything. She stood up and grabbed her coat. "I'm going to the office. We need to get this to the media as soon as possible." The following morning, Emma and her team sat around a large conference table, poring over the evidence Kyle had uncovered. It was even more explosive than they had hoped. Petrov's offshore accounts were connected to illegal activities, including money laundering and bribery, stretching across several countries. If they could tie him to these criminal actions, there would be no way for him to come back from it. "This is it," Emma said, her voice steady but filled with determination. "This is the kind of evidence that will destroy him. We need to get this into the hands of the media before his lawyers can do anything to stop us." Trump nodded. His eyes narrowed. "We're moving fast. We can't let him get ahead of us." They worked quickly, preparing a statement for the press and filing it with the authorities. They knew Petrov's team would fight back hard, but this new evidence could be enough to force the courts to rule in their favor once and for all. As the media storm began to pick up, the effects were immediate. Petrov's name was plastered across headlines, linked to corruption, money laundering, and illegal dealings. His reputation, built over decades, began to crumble. Investors pulled their support, and board members who had once been loyal to him started to distance themselves. The public outcry was deafening, and even some of Petrov's most influential allies began to question their support. But Petrov wasn't going down without a fight. In retaliation, he filed more lawsuits, accusing Emma and her team of defamation and unlawful business practices. The attacks came fast and furious, but Emma stood firm. She knew that the truth was on their side, and she wouldn't back down. The war had just escalated to a whole new level. In the midst of the chaos, Emma found herself in the courtroom, facing off against Petrov's legal team. It was a tense environment, with each side preparing for the final battle. The pressure was unbearable, but Emma had come this far, and she wasn't about to let Petrov win. As the trial began, Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She had the evidence, the support of the board, and the media on her side. Now, all she needed was the legal victory to seal the deal. Petrov's lawyers did everything they could to discredit her, attacking her credibility and trying to paint her as the villain in this war. But Emma didn't flinch. She had faced worse before, and this time, she was ready. The truth would win. As the courtroom drama unfolded, Emma's legal team delivered their final arguments, laying out the case against Petrov. They had connected the dots, tying him to the criminal activities that had once been hidden in the shadows. The tide had turned. Petrov's empire, built on lies and deceit, was about to crumble. The judge retired to deliberate, and for the first time in months, Emma allowed herself to relax, even if only for a moment. She had done everything she could. Now, it was in the hands of the court. In this chapter, the battle against Petrov intensifies as Emma and her team prepare for the legal showdown that could decide everything. With new evidence of Petrov's criminal activities, they go on the offensive, exposing him for his role in money laundering and other illegal dealings. But Petrov doesn't give up easily, filing more lawsuits and trying to discredit Emma. The stage is set for a high-stakes courtroom drama that will determine the future of the company and the fate of both Emma and Petrov. The courtroom was silent as the judge returned, his footsteps echoing in the hushed room. Emma sat at the defense table, her hands clenched together, her mind racing. The tension in the air was palpable, and for a moment, it felt as if the world had stopped. Everything had led to this final moment, the culmination of months of struggle, of navigating treacherous waters, and of standing up against Viktor Petrov, a man who had seemed invincible. As the judge took his seat, the heavy weight of the room seemed to double. Petrov's team had done everything they could to discredit Emma and her legal team, throwing out accusations, legal jargon, and attempting to paint her as a villain in this story. But Emma knew the truth was on her side, and she had the evidence to prove it. The judge cleared his throat, and the room felt even quieter. After reviewing the evidence presented and the arguments made by both sides, I have reached a decision. Emma held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She glanced over at Trump, who stood at her side, his usual confidence replaced by a quiet intensity. This was it, the decision that would change everything. I find that Viktor Petrov's actions were indeed illegal, involving money laundering, bribery, and other unlawful business practices, the judge continued. Emma exhaled a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She could feel the shift in the room, a collective sigh of relief from her team. The board's decision to block the merger was lawful and in the best interest of the company. The lawsuit filed by Mr. Petrov is hereby dismissed. A wave of emotions crashed over Emma. For months, it had felt like she was running on empty, constantly battling, constantly fighting. But now, with the final judgment handed down, she could feel the weight of everything she had endured finally beginning to lift. "We have won," she whispered under her breath, her voice barely audible. But the relief didn't come immediately. She knew this victory was just one chapter of a much larger battle. Petrov's empire may have crumbled, but the scars of this war would take time to heal. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Petrov's defeat was headline news. He had tried to fight back with every ounce of his power and influence, but it hadn't been enough. His reputation was in tatters, his financial empire was under investigation, and he was left reeling from the blow. Emma's company, on the other hand, was thriving, its future secure, at least for now. But even with the victory in hand, Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of bittersweet emptiness. She had won, yes, but at what cost? The war had taken its toll on her physically and emotionally. She had lost friends, had been betrayed by people she had trusted, and had fought through a battle that had threatened everything she had worked for. As she sat at her desk one morning, staring at the reports in front of her, she couldn't shake the feeling that this victory wasn't the end of the story. There would always be someone like Petrov, someone who was driven by greed and ambition, someone who would stop at nothing to take what wasn't theirs. And while Emma had triumphed, she knew the world of business was constantly changing, and she would have to stay vigilant, always prepared for the next challenge. Trump walked into the office, carrying a coffee cup. "It's over, Emma," he said, a small smile on his face. "Petrov's lawyers are already packing up their files. It's done." Emma glanced up at him, meeting his eyes. "Is it really?" Trump set the coffee cup down on her desk and took a seat across from her. "You've just gone through the toughest battle of your career. You've done something most people would never even dream of. You've taken down one of the biggest players in the business world." Emma nodded, but her gaze drifted toward the window, her thoughts a million miles away. "But at what cost?" she repeated, almost to herself. "I've had to question everything I believed in. I've had to fight against everything I've ever stood for just to survive." Trump's voice softened. "Survival's never easy, especially when you're fighting for something bigger than yourself. But you've done it, Emma. You've proven that you don't have to sacrifice your values to win. You fought for your company, your team, and your future. And you've come out on top." Emma let out a slow breath, feeling the weight of Trump's words sink in. There was truth in them. She had fought for what was right, even when the odds were stacked against her. And now, even though the road ahead was still uncertain, she knew she had the strength to face whatever came next. Weeks turned into months, and Emma's life slowly returned to some sense of normalcy. The media had largely moved on, focusing on the fall of Petrov and the fallout from his illegal activities. Emma's company was more stable than ever, and though the scars of the battle remained, she had come out stronger. But she had changed. The woman who had entered this fight was no longer the same as the one who walked out of it. She had learned the hard way that the world of business was not just about profits and losses, but about integrity, relationships, and the unshakable belief in doing what was right, even when it seemed impossible. As she walked through the office, Greeting her colleagues and taking stock of everything she had built, Emma smiled to herself. She had fought for her dreams, for her company, and for the people who believed in her. And in the end, she had won. It wasn't just a victory over Petrov. It was a victory over the doubts, the fears, and the obstacles that had once seemed insurmountable. And as she looked to the future, she knew one thing for certain. She was ready for whatever came next. Reflection and message. As Emma sat in her office that evening, watching the sunset over the city, she thought about everything that had led her to this point. The challenges she had faced, the sacrifices she had made, and the victories she had won. She had been tested in ways she never imagined, and yet, here she was, standing tall. In the end, she knew that success wasn't just about the battles won or the money earned. It was about resilience, the ability to keep going, to rise after every fall, and to stand firm in the face of adversity. Emma had learned that the true victory lay not in defeating her enemies, but in conquering her own fears and doubts. And with that, Emma finally understood. The journey was just beginning. In this final chapter, Emma secures her victory over Petrov, and with the court ruling in her favor, she triumphs in her battle to protect her company. But the victory comes with reflection on the cost of the war, both personal and professional. As Emma looks to the future, she realizes that the battle may be over, but the journey to building something meaningful is far from complete. Her victory is a testament to her strength, resilience, and the unyielding belief that doing what's right will always lead to a better tomorrow.